First up, we had The Spanish Love Deception, and I was going through it, but I saw potential despite the paw-sized hands. Then came The American Roommate Experiment, where I saw that potential come to fruition. And now, The Long Game. I had to find out if Armas had genuinely improved or if her previous book was a bit of a fluke. So hi, hello, and welcome, or welcome back, I suppose. Today, we are back in the Bad Reputation Book Club, where I do the reading, so you don't have to. And I will say, you have seen the timestamp, so you can tell that this is a long one. I cannot guarantee that this is all being recorded in one session. I have set it, so I don't have to do that. I don't know how my visuals are going to look today, beyond me doing art. There's definitely going to be one piece, there may be a couple. I don't know how that's going to play out, so I hope you enjoy your visuals today. Now, Elena Armas is someone who I was fully on the fence about going into this because of what I've seen from her before. She's not like an E.L. James or like a Colleen Hoover type person, but I do have decidedly mixed feelings on her work. Spanish Love Deception was not an easy read despite its popularity. It's easy in the way it's written, it's not easy because of what it's actually saying. And I know I'm not alone in this. She's very popular on BookTok and related social media areas, but I see a lot of mixed reviews on her. She's a Marmite type of author, like a lot of the authors who are very popular on BookTok type places. And with her first two books, people often seem to love one and hate the other, with those opinions swaying in both directions. For example, I could not stand the characters in Spanish Love Deception, and it made me really not enjoy the book, whereas I really enjoyed The American Roommate Experiment. I thought that was a really good book, or at least it was, it was doing exactly what a book in this genre should be doing. I wasn't super blown away about it beyond going, wait, this is by the same author as Spanish Love Deception? Really? That's the other way I was blown away by it, but it was an enjoyable book. So today I want to have that, this is the rubber match. Am I swaying positively or negatively overall with Armas, and does she deserve a spot in the Bad Reputation Book Club Hall of Fame? So settle in, get cozy. What is it that people do long videos, get a snack, get a nice warm drink, come with me as I dive headfirst into Armas' latest novel, The Long Game. And just before we start, spoilers ahead, obviously. Chapter 1. Adeline. The head rolled off his shoulders and halted at my feet with a thump. Great opener. I mean, let's be real, it's not hard to improve on that of the Spanish Love Deception's opener, but I want to keep comparisons to her other books to somewhat of a minimum. This isn't connected to the first two books, and it should be reviewed on its own. Now, obviously, I'm not going to be completely separated from comparisons. It's all the same author. I am going to be looking back, but I do want to review this book on its own. And this is a good opener all by itself. It's eye-catching and exactly the sort of thing I would expect from a book in this genre. So this opener is in reference to a video that one of our leads is being shown, that lead being Adeline. This is a heterosexual, as far as we know, couple. And she's our female lead, and she's being shown this video. She is part of the management, media-wise, for an American soccer team, the Miami Flames. Now, I'm probably going to call it football for the most part because I am English. And she does, in part, it seems, have that job because her father owns the club, but it's apparent throughout that she's a genuine hard worker. She's not just resting on being a nepo baby, and also that her dad would not just give her a job, but she's definitely had a leg up because of that. And she's in a meeting with her father and another higher up called David. The video is of Adeline going for the team's mascot, Sparkles, something that will come up on repeat throughout. And if we ever hear about a big bird that she's gone for or anything like that, that's Sparkles. It's like a bird unicorny thing, I think. That sort of thing is not particularly standout and important, but She's gone for the mascot Sparkles. And it's fair enough that it comes up on repeat because it is the catalyst for everything else going forward. We would not have our romantic leads meeting without this. So it's fine that it comes up on repeat. And in regard to David, we get this. It is, the younger man agreed, and I didn't need to look at him to know that he was smirking. I knew that smirk. I'd kissed that smirk. Dated it for a complete year, then worked under it when he'd been handed the position I'd dreamed of my whole life. I knew that smirk. Fine. I'd kissed that smirk. All good. Dated it for a complete year. Just the smirk? Not the whole man? Then worked under it when he'd been handed the position I'd dreamed of my whole life. Now listen, if you're losing out on a position to nothing more than a mouth in a certain position, then honestly, that's on you. Can't wait to be told I just don't understand metaphors. Because that's going to come up a lot. I love making jokes about that sort of thing. I understand metaphors. Some of them are silly. That one's bloody silly. The incident. My lips pressed into a tight line. My father clicked his tongue, returning his eyes to the device and unlocking it again. How often are people pressing their lips into a tight line that this specific brand of author always gets it into their work at least once, and usually way more than that? It's a pretty common recurring expression, and beyond the Canadians in South Park, what even is that expression? Like, I don't see it unless people are intentionally putting on a face. I've never seen anybody actually express with that, and I'm not on camera, as you can tell. And if I were, I would like I'm doing it, I guess. And throughout this scene where we're learning what the consequences of Adeline's actions will be, these cartoonish expressions really make themselves known, and unfortunately they really become a mainstay. So get used to me bringing that up, because it's really frustrating. Like later in the page we get, my lips popped open again, and look, maybe I just have lockjaw. But this is either giving Goldfish or AI trying to learn how human expressions work. Do you know the Shane Dawson face? Do you know that, like, the meme face that he does where he like pops his face open like that? Or pops his face up and makes him sound like he's fucking snake unhinging his jaw. That's fine. But like, what I don't want when I'm reading a book where I'm supposed to, you know, probably want to be this character or the other, I don't want to, you know, have the POV you are cheddar. Thank you. And not so far later, we do get her like clamping her jaw shut. And you know what? Maybe it's less AI and it's more like ventriloquist dummy. Like, there are plenty of horror films where a ventriloquist puppet takes over its master, and maybe our master decided to branch out. The story described in the blurb won't be any different. It's just, you're visually a little, you know, different than what she usually does. Instead of a regular woman, we just have a Victorian nightmare creation that bears a striking resemblance to Timothée Chalamet. And I'm sure that having this in your mind, if you ever decide to read this book in the future, will make all of the explicit scenes feel perfectly normal. And, you know, while her going for the mascot like a little Rottweiler would cause enough problems for the team's image as is, we are, of course, in the digital age. And like I said, this meeting is where Adeline is being showed a video of what happened. A video that has, of course, gone viral. And I mean, she did effectively behead the mascot. That visual is very funny. I'm not surprised that it picked up traction. You know, anything and everything can go viral in our day and age, especially while we have things like TikTok. TikTok sends things viral so quickly because everything's so short. And while I personally wouldn't put a number on views, especially not like with our world of so many different platforms and re-uploads, the number that Armas puts on it is 6 million views, and that's not that ludicrous as a viral number. This is, you know, you're going to have views from anybody who knows this sport, and then it's going to escape out. It's not that, it's maybe a little high, but then it's like, oh, there are all these different platforms. This isn't something I'm complaining about. I would rather somebody slightly highball it than, like, It's got 10,000 views. It's so viral. Like, in this day and age, that doesn't really mean anything, especially on your short form TikTok apps. Listen, I am quick to laugh about, the way people in media do talk about virality, but TikTok numbers are, like I say, a whole different animal. The numbers aren't lingered on too much either, so I'm not mad about this. I just think it's worth bringing up that if this is the sort of thing, because I've heard some people talk about, they get a bit of an ick in books where, like, social media is a presence. Maybe this, opening would cause some issues, but social media isn't a huge part of this. I mean, yeah, she's trying to do a social media front when she gets there, but it's not like we see things like names of social medias being brought up much. So anyway, I didn't physically harm Paul. You what? My father pressed. Apparently, I beheaded a 6'2" bird made from foam, polyester, and acrylic feathers that goes by the name of Sparkles, and represents immortality, according to the video evidence. But saying that wouldn't help, so my mouth hung open for what felt like the longest 5 seconds in history, and I didn't say a thing. So, to get it out of the way, her mouth hanging open like that is only further proof of my theory that she is a puppet. But the stuff that's leading up to that is fun. It's, it's very simple. It's basic kind of funny stuff that isn't laugh out loud funny, but it helps with tone setting in the early going. And actually, I am hung up on the expressions, because why are all of her expressions centered around her mouth? There's a whole face there, and emotions are shown elsewhere. I'm to assume that she has eyebrows. She seems like a well-groomed woman. Why she doesn't have she doesn't really ever raise her eyebrows. The other person who has facial expressions that are anywhere but his mouth are the male romantic lead, and it's always because his eyebrows are furrowing and his eyes are darkening. It's like, okay, so the two genders' mouth expression and eyebrow expression, give it a rest. I can turn this around, I swear. I will find a way to benefit from the wave of extra attention. Even the hashtag. We all know the team is not making headlines as it is, and we've been stuck at the bottom of the Eastern Conference for so long that my father's face hardened, his eyes turning an icy shade of blue. I only kept that so long to cut on, over-explaining story, but can you explain to me how his eyes did that? Were they not icy blue before? I don't but I get the whole, eyes darkening thing, and I know that does come up later, but what even is the metaphor here? It's hardly important, but it's really annoying, because I remember later on, she does exactly the same thing with somebody's eyes turning a different shade of green. What you mean is, when the brows, drop, and, because this is what eyebrows, but eyes darkening mean, and I think I re-explain it later, but, this is a long enough video that it'd be nice for you to get a refresher. That when somebody's brows drop and their head tilts in a certain way, it looks like their eyes are darkening, obviously it creates a shadow, and especially I think that's why people do use this more with men, because they're more likely to have a heavy set brow or whatever. But you can't just magically change the colour of your eyes, your iris. Is that the iris? Hang on. Yes, the iris is the colour part of the eye. You can't just change that without contacts. So what did he do? Did he get annoyed, just pop a pair of contacts in, or pop the other ones out? Get real. And let's just get back to it. So while Adeline believes that she can use this to the team's advantage in a sort of all publicity is good publicity kind of way, her father and David aren't so sure. But I think that's because they lack imagination. I think they should use this to their advantage and have a gritty type situation, but instead of a kind of violent mascot, you have her out being a mascot hunter, hide her in the crowd in some kind of Where's Wally type situation, and then if another mascot spots her, or if she spots the mascot, then get her to go hog wild on wherever the whatever mascot she likes. I understand it needs work, it needs refining, but what I'm saying is management has no imagination. Get her to be the reverse Gritty. I think it would be great. Though I am glad they are an MLS team, Major League Soccer, but that's only because I don't know if she could hold her own against Gritty, or I don't know, the Clemson Tiger or something, because I don't know what unholy spirit imbues that fucking tiger thing when he rubs his rock, but I don't know that he is actually a mascot. I'm so sure that that bug-eyed man is a cryptid. Don't get me wrong, I love that fucked up beast. But, Jesus Christ, why does he keep looking at me like that? Why is he such like a little Alex Coughlin looking ass? Stop staring at me like that. But anybody who is watching who knows me well knows I do love that mascot. He's so fucked. Why does he keep staring at me like that? And why is there a little one who just looks normal? We looked it up because I wanted to know what the relation was between there's the tiger and there's the cub, and the cub is apparently his nephew, and the nephew looks normal. It's just like a regular Tony Tiger looking ass mascot, but no, now we have this like giant one who stares at me. It's so weird. But anyway, due to the lack of imagination, they take a different route. She's being sent away to effectively work on like a pet project of her father's to keep her away from prying eyes. And plot setup wise, yeah, it's a good opener. Some of the writing leaves a lot to be desired, but I can't judge a whole 373 page book in just 11 pages. Armas has the chance to make me forget this, and, you know, I would say maybe by the end I would have forgotten that she's a ventriloquist dummy, but I didn't. But this opener is fine, and I do criticise Armas's writing a lot, like some of the stylistic choices she makes, but I was not looking forward to the rest of the book from this opener, but by the end of the book I did have a good time. Spoiler alert, I was having a good time, despite how some of this review might make you feel, because when I'm annoyed at stuff, I get more heated than, like, when I enjoy something. I get really bright and vibrant, like, I can talk more about shit I hate, and I think maybe that's because I'm toxic. Chapter 2. Adeline. Now, because she didn't do any research before getting to her location, something clearly out of character for her even this early, she has to be on call with her friend as she's getting to the place she's going to be staying. He's trying to find out who these Green Warriors are, the team that she'll be managing, but he seems to be struggling to find anything. And her unpreparedness shows itself quite quickly, given that it's becoming increasingly clear that she's driving to a cabin in the woods. Now, like I said earlier, maybe Elena Armas is deciding to venture into horror. She's not, but I think this could have been a great little, like, is it a bait and switch? Yeah, I'm thinking of a bait and switch. But she's not in the sunny climes of Miami anymore. She's in the mountains of North Carolina, and this conversation with her friend is something, I guess, it's entirely forgettable, which will become a theme with any scene with her friend Matthew. That wouldn't be so important without the existence of the epilogue, but we have a long way to go before we get there. He's a bit of a nothing character. He sort of serves a purpose, and book-wise, that purpose is to just sort of give her information from back home. Me-wise, his purpose is to be fucking annoying and ruin my experience with the book. Every time he showed up, I'm like, leave, go away, leave. But we'll explore that more later. And when she arrives at the cabin, the realization of everything to do with her situation that's happened in the past few days, it hits her. She tries moving a car in reverse, feels a bump from hitting something, so she slams so hard on the brake that she jolts forward and, like, ends up hitting her head. And she's dazed, but, you know, she feels like she needs to move her car, so she turns out she only hit a chicken. It's fine. She can check on the chicken, it'll be good, right? Well, I can't just leave the car here. Pebbles jumped from under the tyres as the vehicle started to move. Maybe I should check on the chicken too. A thought formed in the haziness that was my head. Oh god, what if I killed it? My eyes drifted to the direction the chicken had run off. I couldn't believe this. Another stupid bird. My eyelids fluttered shut. Just for a moment. It couldn't have been more than a nanosecond, a short-lived reprieve, but a thump jolted me. A thump. I had hit something. Again. Something larger than a chicken. Something like a... Oh god, don't let it be a bear. My eyes blinked open, panic surging. In the same breath, a growl, a bear-like growl to my utter dismay, came from the rear of my car. My foot shot forward, but my head was fuzzy and my basic reflexes clearly amiss, because instead of the brakes, I must have hit the accelerator and hurled against a tree. And as much as I might sound like a bit of a mentalist for saying this, because, you know, she's going around hitting stuff, it's a good rom-com scene. This is our meet cute. We learn that she didn't hit a bear, but we'll get there when we get there. It's in the start of the next chapter. It's a Bridget Jones style, it just keeps going wrong and getting worse type scene. And it's also not tee-hee-hee, I'm relatable because I'm so clumsy. It's genuine feeling. It feels like she's stressed, so she hits one thing, and then the stress gets worse, so then she goes and, oh god, I've hit another thing, and it just keeps getting worse. It's a good, simple, rom-com type scene. It's good writing, and the stuff you look for in books like this. Chapter 3. Cameron. The supposed bear that Adeline hit was in fact our other POV protagonist. It's just Cameron. He sees that she's basically knocked herself out when she's hit the tree, and as you'd imagine, he is immediately worried about her, and he gets her out of the car, but she is just dead weight. I tilted my head back for a second, dragging my hand down my face and dreading the reasonable course of action. I couldn't wrap my head around the fact that she almost run me over. Missing the fucking bird that had been roaming about the property for weeks was fair enough, but me? I had been standing right behind the car, and I wasn't a small bloke. She'd overlooked a 6'2" man in broad daylight and then hurled the goddamn car against a tree. Bloke. The word echoed around my near-empty skull until eventually it found the brain cell, and I had the horrible realisation that he's British. Inevitably, he's probably just like a very generic kind of English. I don't recall it ever being specified where he's from. The closest we get to anything like that is we found out his grandmother is Italian, so I presume probably he's just from somewhere around London, like in or around. No specifics, but it's usually a London area. I can't imagine anybody but a British author writing out, she overlooked a 6'2" man in broad daylight and then hurled the goddamn car against a tree. I can't imagine it. Do you know what I mean? Like I said, it's just a generic form of English. And in my head, I did have this idea that he's a bit of a Millwall-style hooligan who just, like, makes weird posts about XL bullies on Facebook. He's got, like, a North Face jacket and he might be in the EDL. That was just an early little joke I had. It's not something that I ended up continuing in my notes. Occasionally I did call him Millwall, but I found something funnier very shortly after to continue in my notes. But I will say this. I think this is the only time his height is brought up explicitly beyond him being big and or tall. But he is explicitly said to be 6'2", and I swear any other time his height or size is brought up, they make him sound fucking huge. And maybe beefiness wise, like, he is a bit of a big boy, but obviously I'm saying this at the beginning and I am reading a script, not to, ruin the illusion here, but I know what running joke I started making in my notes and then I continue in my script. I'm not taking them out because of this tiny part of a throwaway line. Like, I am just too deep into this joke. And maybe I do suffer from wrestling brain rot, but isn't 6'2" just like a regular kind of tall? I have family members that are taller than that. On my dad's side, none of them on my mum's side. They're a bunch of short asses, myself included. But, like, I swear my brother's like 6'2". I'm like, is this just a case of me going, am I mad? Did she not make him out to be, like, Bigfoot? But because he is giant, being hit by a car did no damage to him, but after hitting him, then a tree, she's taken a nasty bump to the head again. Obviously, she hit her head the first time and she, like, slammed on the brakes and then she did it again. So she's out cold and he's about to phone an ambulance as she starts stirring. Personally, I would still make that call, but he opts instead just to try to, wake her up, see if she is concussed. If she's been out cold for more than a couple of seconds, she's probably fucking concussed, but she's woozy when she wakes, but she is aware enough to be able to have a bit of a back and forth with him. She swipes at him, not wanting him to touch her, even for help, which is fair enough, really. If I just woke up in the middle of the woods, half concussed, and Bigfoot was my rescuer, I would be concerned. Oh god, there's definitely erotica about that, isn't there? Like, you're lost in the woods and you get rescued by Bigfoot and then loving ensues. Oh, if that is the case, I don't want anybody to tell me. I'm happily living in the knowledge that it probably does exist, but I don't have to see it. One of my early Bad Rip book clubs was about a book like that, but with aliens instead. I think it was called, like, Ice Planet Barbarians or something like that. Honestly, one, it has a horrendous non-consensual scene. Like, completely non-consensual. Explicitly so. And then there's another one where it's like, she turns out to be into it, but it's still like the lines of consent are like, But honestly, just imagine, what if a product from Bad Dragon also had the body of a vibrating man? And he's like huge and blue, whatever. But back to the story at hand, she comes to a little more and realises that the bear she hit was in fact the man currently sort of crouching over her. And there's constant back and forth until the end of the chapter about like what help she needs. It's a clear enemies to lovers setup, and part of that is her being certain she's renting the big cabin that she's pulled up to. And this only makes it more certain that she really needs help for her head. Eventually she does get to her feet though, and we find out that even in heels, she barely reaches his chin. And look, I get it. I'm a short fella, I get the size difference thing, but for me, like, big man and tiny petite woman is just something I've seen so much of, and like, it's nothing against our mass. Like what you like, I just don't care for it anymore. It's like, there's that god-awful film, The Kissing Booth, and you've got Jacob Elordi as the male love interest in that, and I think he's like 6'4" or something like that, and Joey King, I think is the name of the female lead in that, and she can't be much taller than me. Like, she's got to be under 5'4", and it just looks ridiculous. And that's the vibes I'm getting from this. And it's just like, if we're going to have a tall man, can we just have also a tall woman for once? Can we just have some tall women getting what they deserve, which is a man that's also taller than them? Because every tall woman I've ever met, pretty much, has gone, oh, you know, I don't really care what I want in a man, but it would be nice if he was taller than me. I mean, obviously they do have some care, but you know what I mean. Anyway, look. He starts getting particularly frustrated with her, and to calm himself, he begins counting down from 10, and my, like, anger issues, but make it sexy alarm was ringing, but thankfully that doesn't come up again, like, at all from what I recall. It's, you know, it's not an issue that it sticks with me, and, you know, usually that sort of thing would. I've read so many books where the male love interest has anger issues, and I don't remember that being a thing in this ever. But this did make me go, ugh. So thankfully our master's not going for that one. But I don't remember her doing Elsewhere either. I don't remember that being the issue in Spanish Love Deception, but I don't watch my own videos back after this one. I think that was like a year and a half ago, if not more. It was like summer of 2022, I think. And then probably would have been... Yeah. Was that 2022? Yeah, and then last year at some point I read American Roommate Experiment. Or was that also back end of... Anyway, look, doesn't matter. Chapter 4. Adeline. So she checks her phone to see a bunch of missed calls and messages from her mate Matthew. Obviously he's reasonably worried about her. And, you know, she just tells him, she dropped reception, don't worry about me, like... And... when he expresses genuine concern, she responds, stop worrying about me like I'm some helpless child, and trust me, I'm fine. And I'm really glad her refusal to accept care and kindness becomes a character development point, because it isn't necessarily a bad trait so long as it becomes clear that she has the capacity to accept it at some point. Like, this is one of our protagonists. A permanent standoffish nature can wear a reader, i.e. in this case me, down after a while, especially in a book like this. We want to see that hard shell begin to crack, and we see all that vulnerable softness. It's something that I see a lot, like a very particular kind of stubbornness, where it's like, I don't need help from anybody, and that just continues, and it becomes really annoying. And it's like, if somebody is offering you help, it's fine to take it. I understand that asking for help can be really difficult, but if somebody reaches out and says, do you need help with this? Repeatedly telling the world no isn't, like, helping you at all. It doesn't make you big and strong and help, like, it doesn't make you big and strong, it just makes you stubborn. Just accept help if somebody offers it. I'm not saying in every situation you have to accept help, but if you know you need it, don't turn it down. So she walks up to the cabin that Bigfoot just walked into, believing it's hers, and she goes to knock on the door, but he opens it just before she can knock, and we found out that she actually isn't, like, petite, but he still towers over her. She also kind of recognises him at this point, but she can't pinpoint from what. But she comes up to his chin in heels. So, like, she is, like, it says, oh, I'm not particularly small, but she comes up to his chin in heels. She's tiny. Like, he's 6'2". Again, my brother is about 6'1", 6'2", and in flats, the top of my head probably reaches his shoulder. So if I put heels on, I would probably reach his chin. Like, she's probably about my height. By the way, for context, I'm 5'1". I'm a short man. And, like, maybe it's not short if you're a woman or whatever, but, like, it isn't tall. Like, I think average is about 5'4". So, you know, that 3 inches makes a difference. She's probably 5'4" in heels. I'm thinking regular heels, like the pumps. I'm thinking that, and that's usually like a standard, like 2-3 inch heel minimum, I'm guessing. But there is clearly some disconnect with this in terms of the writing, because if you want the size difference to be part of your dynamic, then clarity is super useful. To his credit, he waited. He could have easily overpowered me and shut the door. I wasn't what one would consider a small woman, and I was wearing heels, but he still managed to tower over me. He also looked lean, strong. My eyes bounced to the shoulder and arm visible through the slit of the door. A single word came to mind. Athlete. I recognised a high-performance athlete when I saw one. And listen, athlete is exactly what he is, for sure. He's a goalie, or, you know, he was, so he's physically fit in the sort of way one would probably think of if you go to, like, think of any given person and say athlete. But I do have problems with the wording, because of course I do, because I'm me and I'm a permanent nitpicker. So one, when you say athlete, do you mean like this? Or like this? Or maybe you mean like this? I'd imagine this is what you have in mind, but an athletic body means so much. I'm sure many of us have seen the picture taken from, I believe it was an Olympic, like a collection of Olympians, and it's just this series of a huge different type of bodies. And two, let's assume you mean he's got like that Ronaldo but hairier type look to him. Why have you been making him out to be huge? It's just the issue with that no real clarity about the actual size differential. Like, obviously, 6'2" isn't short, but he's not going to be built like Eddie Hall, is he? He's always towering over her, but I assume he's got that, like, I don't know, like I say, the Ronaldo physique, a Jay White type physique. Tall, sure, but all things considered, shredded more than huge. I think I'm going too far into this, and I know I should move on, but it's the idea of, like, him towering over her. I think that implies a sort of mass to him, rather than that sort of model-esque type physique that we see in, like, well, like footballers, to be honest. Most of them, they got thick legs for sure, but torso-wise, they're usually, like, more slender, I guess. But, I mean, I'm not saying they're, you know, like little twinks or whatever, but they're still not huge. But, like I said, I should move on from this. So, she's so sure that there's been a double booking at the lodge, but it turns out that she hasn't quite read the name on the booking properly. She isn't staying in the gorgeous, huge lodge before her, but instead, she's stuck in a kinda nasty, run-down little cottage on the same lot. And we get a really good use of the scene break. It's a good bit of comic timing, and it's got the energy of a rom-com film as much of a rom-com book, which I think works really nicely. His eyes gave me an incredulous once-over. Sorry, quick aside. Just say that he gave her a once-over. I can assume it's not his spleen doing that, but anyway. His eyes gave me an incredulous once-over. You can't possibly think that you'll make it in there. Not short, and certainly not long-term. He tilted his head. In fact, I don't think you'll make it a single night in there. He wasn't wrong. I probably couldn't. But I'd spent half a lifetime surrounded by men just like him. Competitive, judgmental. I didn't like to be underestimated, and I'd already lost one battle to him. I guess we'll have to see about that. I turned around and climbed down the steps. When I was at the bottom, I looked at him over my shoulder and added, "Neighbour?" "What do you mean it's all booked?" "There are no hotels or Airbnbs in Green Oak." It's good. It's a simple bit of using the scene break, and I just think it works really nicely. It's cute and fun. Again, it's the sort of thing that you are looking for when you are reading books like this. And she's on the phone with Kelly, her assistant, or at least her former assistant. She was definitely her assistant before the incident happened. And we get the state of this cabin described to us, and if this were a different book, it would 100% be home to a ghost or ghoul. Like I said, she has some kind of setup like this could have been a horror story, but, you know, maybe some weird old man who lives in the woods and eats people could be there. And even if she weren't a little bit up herself at this point in the book, you know, she'd be well within her rights to want to sleep anywhere else. Kelly does suggest that Adeline should yarsify the place up, and to be clear, they're on a phone call. They're talking out loud, and I know I'm being very nitpicky again, but is that a word anybody says out loud? Unironically, I mean, like, I'm pretty sure, like, I'm pretty terminally online, but surely there's some separation there, especially if you are saying it, like, again, unironically, and you're saying it out loud. It might be a word that I say for the bit in a text or a message or whatever, but I don't think, other than uttering it right there, I don't think I've ever said yarsify out loud. And also maybe that's because I'm British, though. Americans watching this, maybe let me know if it sounds more natural in you guys' accent. But, you know, sprucing the place up would only go so far, and it does seem pretty dishevelled. And during the time fretting about the college, why do I keep saying college? Cottage. I have it written very clearly. I'm just dim. So during her time fretting about the I nearly said it again. Fretting about the cottage, she realises that the reason she recognised him, but couldn't quite place it, is because he's got a beard. It was throwing her off. And he is Cameron Caldini. He is an English football player. He was a goalkeeper. And eventually he moved to play in the States. But at some point he basically disappeared off the face of the planet. Now, we know now where he ended up. But the question becomes, why? And we also here get the first sign that her friend Matthew is a bit fucking weird. Like, at some point in the scene she ends up talking to him as well. But he loves Cameron. Does she end up talking to him as well, or is she just thinking about it because she recognises him? That I can't remember, and I'm not going back to find out. I think she's actually just going, oh, it's Cameron, and then thinks about Matthew. But yeah, Matthew loves Cameron, and it's clear from, like, this point that he isn't normal about him. Like, I get being an excitable fan, but he only gets weirder and weirder and more insufferable as the book goes on, and it's just like, ugh. Chapter 5. Cameron. Now, we've moved on to the next day, and we're seeing Cameron refusing to let the young girls of the Green Warriors film him, and it's presumably for some, like, TikTok or something like that. We find out soon that Cameron is living here pretty anonymously, hence the reason he's grown the beard out, and obviously, if they do put him on, like, TikTok or something like that, his anonymity will be compromised. And Maria is a girl begging at him, and she's the kid we'll hear from the most. We see some other girls mentioned by name. Occasionally we see their behaviour, but, you know, we hear about the others, but she's like the proxy voice of the team, I guess. Like, we see another girl, Chelsea, whose whole thing is that she's like, she wears a tutu when she plays football because she can't fully decide which hobby she wants to take up, or she wants to do both or something like that. It's like, it's not that important. Like, at this point as well, the kids are kind of annoying in that way, where it's like, if you're dealing with one kid, like, just on repeat and asking inane questions or whatever, it's manageable. But when you have a gaggle, it's, well, I know a lot of teachers take up smoking, and I can see why. And this continues for a good bit until, like, Cameron's inevitable headache kicks in, and it's a cute, funny scene, to be honest. Like, I know I'm saying the kids are annoying, but, like, they're still kind of cute, and it's semi-relatable. It's, you know, it's a fun little scene. So I stood there, wondering how advanced the kids were these days while the headache set in. Jesus, had been, bloody footballer. A small town kiddie team wasn't my place. I could barely get them to run a proper drill. I was only here because I promised Josephine, and she'd caught me at a low moment. I had plenty of those lately. I just wished I had a goddamn coffee before practice. But that maniac who claimed to be moving in next door disrupting my routine, I hadn't had time to grab one on my way out. So he calls one of the girls forward, telling her to leave practice while he gets himself a coffee, and it's very clear that he would not be at this practice given the choice. And as he's walking away, he's not really paying attention to where he's going type thing, and he bumps into Adeline when she's on her way in. And she's with the aforementioned Josephine as well, who says, "Camel but ploughed into you, and not for the last time." I wish I was more mature as well, but that's not happening. We learn that Josephine is our small town mayor. It's a voluntary role, and it's something that doesn't really come up a huge amount beyond that she's very clearly invested in her town and she runs a lot of the events there, but she's also only in her late 20s, which is such a surprise to me as I go back over this. Like, I know what's going on with this character as well. Like, her age tracks with that, but she's not written like she's in her late 20s. I'd been adding, like, bare minimum 10 years onto that. I swear she was in her 40s or 50s. There has to be a mistake of some kind. We are not working together with the team. He cannot be involved with the Green Warriors, because if he was, I would know about it. Now that caught my attention. Josephine tilted her head in confusion. Sorry, I've got to go back again. Why is everybody in books like this dogs? Why are they all, like, tilting their head like a cute little fucking chihuahua or something? Every time you say something, like, my cats do that as well. If I look at Zelda and go, "What are you doing, baby? What are you doing?" Like, her head tilts at me because she's got nothing in her head. Why does everybody do this? Anyway, Josephine tilted her head in confusion. But he is. Josephine trailed off for an instant. Cam is the Green Warriors coach. My mouth opened to correct her. I was only doing her a favour by temporarily filling in as a coach, but Adeline's reaction sidetracked me. Her cheeks flamed a deep shade of pink, and her lips parted. Wide and panicked eyes turned to me, and then she said, "He's fired then. Effective immediately." Hear me out. Slight overreaction. Listen, we've all had co-workers we wish were not our co-workers, but this is a bold use of power. It's great though, and it was a moment where I knew this was going to lead to a hard-to-read scene, but if Elmas played it right, it would be like that on purpose, like the sort of thing where you're going, stop, 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 but it's funny still. Chapter 6. Adeline. Cameron Caldini, goalkeeping prodigy and Premier League legend, stared at me. "That's right," I mumbled. But it wasn't right. I didn't know what was coming out of my mouth. "This is my first decision as general manager of the Green Warriors." Oh, God, did I even have a title? "And as the new person in charge of supervising the team's activities and making sure they live up to their full potential, I'm deciding that we don't need him. Therefore, he is fired." My voice cracked, and for some reason I added, "Good day." Josie fell silent. Cameron blinked unbelievably slowly, his lips twitching in a way I couldn't interpret. Strong opener to the chapter, like pure secondhand embarrassment, and yes, it only continues to get worse. And again, that continues to get worse. I mean that as a positive comment on her writing. "You're gonna do what now?" he said. "Okay, I could work with that. With hostility, cynicism, even condescension. I was used to those." "I'm not going to do anything," I told him, my voice gaining strength, "because I already did. You are dismissed from your coaching duties." Josie seemed to particularly recover because she let out an awkward snicker. I think the fun and friendly banter is unnecessarily escalating. How about we let Cam return to practice and discuss this later over a slice of red velvet cake? It's Josie's joint special today, and cake is on the house for newcomers. "There's no need to discuss anything," I answered, my eyes on Cameron, who had tilted his head to one side and was inspecting me in a strange way. "Who hired him?" Something occurred to me. "Did my father send him here too?" "I did," Josie hesitated. "Well, I wouldn't use the word hire, as he's not being paid a dime. A better word is recruited. Yes, I recruited Cam." "You volunteered me," he countered in a bitter tone. "It's good. It's genuinely brilliant work on math. Like, I am being fully sincere. This is the cringe you get, like, where it's like full body, just going, "Adeline, stop it. Please stop it. That's enough." And it's worse. Like, the whole scene is, I'm only giving you snippets. It's genuinely really fun just to be like, But if you can't deal with secondhand embarrassment, I do understand that. I am 50-50 on it. But, sure, she said that he's fired, but that isn't really upheld. Like, they kind of move on. Like, she said nothing. I mean, it feels like the correct response. Cameron storms off, and she has to work to get him back later, but it's not like a long-term problem, and she doesn't exactly have to work that hard. Actually, she kind of threatens him, but it's not something that, it's a long time without him being there, and that's fine. I'm glad that some things are delegated to long and short term, that we understand how that works. And also, but it's not like resolved the next page. I'm looking at you, E.L. James. It's one of the things that makes me go, are you a former fanfiction writer? Because most fanfiction to regular author, like pipeline type people that I've seen, do not know how to not just solve something in the next page. Because, or at the very least, like directly in the next chapter, because often we see it with authors like this where the chapters of the book are literally just the chapters from the fan fiction. And obviously, if you have your readers waiting, it can often feel like you should resolve something straight away. It's like, that's how I know you're not a good writer, because you don't have any patience. But Armas, I will say, knows when to have patience and when to just resolve something as it's needed to. And Adeline here finds out that the team is a bunch of kids, which she wasn't expecting. And as much as I really was enjoying myself at this point, I was just like, man, these two don't want to be here one bit. And my hope was that their job wouldn't fall to the wayside as their romance blossomed. As their romance blossomed. And like, look, this isn't like a huge team, but they still deserve a coach and a manager who put the kids' needs first. Like, I assumed it would be a case of them growing to love the job, and like, that is what happens. But I can't say it was done the most naturally, I guess. Like, it did kind of feel like it just sort of went from they didn't really like the job to Adeline wants to work. Like, I think Adeline's case, it was she might not necessarily like the fact that she has to work with kids, but if she's got a job to do, she'll do it. Whereas Cameron was just like, teehee, I like a girl, so I like the job. Adeline realises that things just keep steadily getting worse for her, and when she brought up the viral mascot stuff, I was like, Oh, right, yeah, one of these kids knowing she did this and bringing it up is, like, not a matter of if, it's when. And I figured it would either be an early thing, sort of not too important, or it would come up in a big way later on and cause big problems. It was sort of a depends which way. I mean, inevitably it was going to come up in a big way, but whatever. You know what I'm saying. My brain is so frazzled right now because I'm already been doing this for an hour, and I know how long this video is going to be, and I know how long the editing is going to be, and I feel sorry for editing me, who's going to have to listen to me talk about this, who's probably already been doing this for God knows how long. Anyway, my eyes blinked back to reality, and I found myself gaping at Cameron. First of all, I'm not going to make a joke about her gaping at him, in that sense. I'm going to be a good boy. But can someone find the puppeteer, please? Her mouth is hanging open again. In a world where I didn't have a ventriloquism bit going, yes, I probably would have made a very different joke about her gaping. But I'm going to be good and say that somebody needs to, get the repair kit and put her mouth back on. Anyway, Josie does stop Adeline using Cameron's full name, but nothing further is said about it at this point. Josie also learns about Adeline and Cameron's rocky start. And Maria, little girl, when she comes over to give Adeline an ice pack for her head, the rest of the kids sort of follow along and they're asking her a bunch of questions. And one of the expression descriptors is, "My lips bobbed." And it's giving further credence to my puppet theory. I would definitely say the way a ventriloquist puppet's mouth moves is bobbing. It's also kind of giving goldfish again, but fine. And after she's asked why she scared Cameron away, her jaw falls to the floor. So again, can we get somebody with that toolkit, please? We need to put that back on. And it is at the end of this scene where one of the kids sees the mascot video, and it's a nothing thing, really, and that's fine. I thought it might take a little longer and might mean a little more than this, but it isn't really a good or bad thing overall. That it doesn't mean anything. Like, the kids knowing would either have been a big or small reveal, but it would have been fine either way. The big reveals were always going to be, why did she attack the bird mascot, and why is Cameron here and also basically undercover. Armas does know patience with romance. It's her thing. She loves a slow burn, so I knew that she would probably have patience to wait for other things as well. Like, the thing is waiting for, one, do the reveals actually make me feel anything? And two, does Armas trust her readers enough not to handhold in that, no, it's okay, there is something coming up, just a little bit longer. Like, we know that revelation will happen, and I was hoping that Armas trusts us enough to have that patience. And from everything I remember, she does do that pretty well. There's a little bit of repetition of, like, those two asking each other what's going on and not really ready to answer it yet, but it's not so constant that I'm going, shh, I know it's coming, you don't have to keep telling me. But, in terms of feeling anything about those reveals, I'd say that it worked. She did her job. But, we'll get more into that when we get there, I guess. And, in terms of patience and trusting her readers, yeah, I definitely say she did well with that. Like, she did better with it with Cameron. If I'm totally honest, it is mostly because of these very early parts. There's a feeling with Adeline of being told sort of like with Adeline, it feels like we're being told, don't worry, the reveal is coming. She gets better at it as the book goes on, but it never comes to proper annoyance. But early on, there is a little bit of, like I said, there's a little bit of that hand holding, but not much. And practice is wrapped up. She's back in the cabin and she's chatting to that friend of hers, Matthew, and she learns that her virality is morphing into meme territory. Though inevitable remixes are happening, she's hashtag Lady Birdinator now, and she pretends to be cool and collected to Matthew, but she is not taking it well. And again, we see her that she can't accept showing her emotions really, but that does change, and it's fair that she's not taking it well. It's completely out of her control. But as she's trying to calm herself down, she hears some unsettling noises. A million things go through her head, none of them pleasant. She is a frequent listener of true crime podcasts, and as she searches the cabin for the source, she realizes or she finds out that she needn't worry. Instead of any ghost, ghoul or serial killer, it's just a little cat. And, you know, this is a normal book. It's just a normal cat. It's a cute little guy. And this scene is kind of unclear because I thought that the cat had put something under her, the cat had put something on her bed because she feels something crawl underneath her, but it actually becomes clear that the bed's infested with something. So I don't know if the cat put something on her bed and therefore it became infested, or it's just a gross bed. I mean, the whole cabin is kind of gross, but because something crawled underneath her in the dark, she bolts outside, as she would. Chapter 7. Cameron. The next morning, Cameron's drinking coffee and chatting to his cats, and, you know, it's safe to assume that one of them was the one dropping a little creature in Adeline's bed, if that is what happened. I'm not sure. And when one of them is repeatedly meowing at him, he says, "I can only deal with one complicated, frustrating female at a time." And, red flag. I'm sorry, but any man not talking like purely medically, using the word female? No thank you. No, absolutely not. Grim. The only men, actually, and women, the only people who I hear referring to women as females, they're always incel or pick me or like not like other girls type people. They're always the worst. And like nobody ever says males. I'm sure they do, like the sort of femcel types people, but I don't think I ever hear, like, it's always like boys or men. It's never males, but it's also like females or girls, and it's just like what. Anyway, he heads outside and, despite his better judgment, walks over to Adeline, who's asleep in a car. And he does check her out, but it doesn't feel too much like Edward Cullen. It just feels like he's seen a good-looking woman. And he bangs on the window, startling her awake, trying to find out why she's in her car in the cold, in shorts and a little top, rather than in her cabin, which might not be great, but like, you can tell from the outside it's probably not great, but it's probably better than, like, from what he can tell, it's probably better than being in a car. Once the window was down, she pinned me with an unimpressed glance. "So, what can I help you with?" My brows shot to the top of my head. "Pardon me?" And again, look, I know it's a metaphor. I'm thick in the ass, not in the head. But why are all of the facial expressions written like this? They're just so cartoonish. Like, these are meant to be normal, earthborn, human beings. They don't have to emote like they're animated or like cringe bait TikTokers. It's just daft. Nobody shows their emotions like this. I just think it's silly. And I can't recall if he's done this before, but during their back and forth here, he calls Adeline darling. And I assume it's just like this is how British people speak. And sure, it's not like that uncommon for a man to use darling when he's talking to any given woman. Or for some people, like, they'll call everybody darling. But I'll be totally honest. Unless they're like a flamboyant gay, which I doubt he is, given that he has, you know, purely seems to have an interest in women. You know, could be a bi king. Love that for him. But it is usually older guys from what I've noticed. And honestly, yeah, I guess it does depend on the guy as to how patronising it is when they use the word. But Cameron kind of gives off patronising energy. And as far as I remember, like, as the book goes on, she kind of ends up liking, or at least accepting him calling her that. But I can't say I ever got on board with it. And there's a few times I'm like that with, like, him, with En Masse trying to make sure he sounds British, which is fine. You've got to throw in words that make him sound like the place that he's from. But sometimes you can try too hard, and if you don't know, then I just wouldn't. I don't know where En Masse is from. I'm pretty sure she's American. I know she's got some Spanish heritage, but I don't believe she's British. If she is, I'll be surprised. I will look her up now, just to try to find out. She is Spanish. There we go. So not British or American and also Spanish. She is just Spanish. Wasn't sure. I just know that, like, her first two books are, well, obviously Spanish Love Deception has a huge contingency set in Spain, but, like, the characters themselves are American with Spanish heritage. Same with Adeline in here, her mother's Spanish, so I wasn't sure. But, anyway, the back and forth is going on, and it begins with him trying to find out, like, why she's out there in the first place. But he makes a snarky comment about her being in Green Oaks, and, like, he has no idea about the mascot thing, and he says what she's doing is akin to just being like a big team using this as a charity case. Why doesn't she just make up a report and go home? And she takes that about as well as you'd imagine. She gets out of the car and begins berating him. His brows bounced up, meeting his hairline. No, they didn't. No, they fucking didn't. Stop it. I'm not here for you, she loud whispered. Wait, what? Why would she stage whisper in this moment? Anyway, her face growing red. I'm here for my franchise, and I'm not a journalist who can just concoct a story. I take my job seriously, and that silly charity quota is my one way to get out of here. And she slams the door into him when she opens it, and I can't lie. I can't say I blame her, because I would do that as well. And also, it was funny. And she is about to storm off, but she turns back to have a proper go at him. And he does realise that he has been a git, but he doesn't apologise. Also, as she's yelling at him, she starts squeaking. And I don't mean that, like, she goes, oh, I'm yelling at you, I'm having a go at you. I mean, like, oh, I'm having a go at you. Like, I don't know if I've ever heard anyone who actually does that in real life. And, like, sure, I get, like, you're yelling and then your voice cracks or something, you know. Or, like, your voice pitches up and your emotions are high and you get really high. But I've never heard anybody squeak. And I don't think I've ever done it myself. And it's such a mainstay of this kind of book. And I don't understand. Like, I've never heard anybody squeak. Like, I've heard somebody get really high. But I've never heard anybody become like this. If somebody can show me, then fine. That's really difficult to do. I don't understand. Again, screeching, I understand. Like, if you're yelling and your voice pitches up and that can happen. But I don't understand squeaking. Anyway, when she gets to her cabin, she does throw a stiletto at him. And I could, you know what? Even if it's not the right thing to do, I understand. She feels justified in it. And you know what? I support her. I get it. Go for it. I squared my shoulders, downed the rest of my coffee, grabbed the flying shoe and headed for her door. The first thing I saw when I ventured into Sweet Heaven Cottage was Adeline. She was still breathing heavily, her hair still very much a mess and her legs and arms on display. Once again, I couldn't stop myself from letting my gaze get a little lost in that last fact, and once again, I was honest enough to admit that I liked what I saw. I liked the curve of her hips and thighs, the sight of her bare feet, and even how her breasts moved with her breathing under that thin top. I was, after all, a living, breathing man. Stop that. Hey, all of that. Like, that's her space. You can't just look, like, when he walked over to the car, to, like, oh, she's sleeping in there. Last time I saw her, like that, she'd been conked out, concussed. Going to check on her, you can maybe, like, justify that. And he goes, oh, she's not wearing much. She's quite pretty. Fine. But, like, that's her space. And he's just walked in there. And if you're checking her out, like, that boldly, you know, and she hasn't noticed, I assume she just didn't immediately clock you coming in. And finally, I don't need to know that you're checking out her feet. It doesn't come up again as far as I can remember. But I can put up with a lot. But I would not like to see that. Thank you. Be into whatever you're into. I don't need to know that you're looking at her bare feet. And also, like I said, like, she's just stormed off after throwing a shoe at him, and he just, like, comes into her space. I'm like, she could have been getting changed. She wasn't, but she could have been. Gross. Give that a rest. I know what you meant, I said with a shrug, and I must decline. Being shanked by a little bird like you is not on my priority list. I placed the shoe I'd received from outside on the floor. Not today, at least. Little bird, excuse you, Jesus, it's so patronising. And again, I can't tell if this is a case of like an author fully intentionally making him patronising, who like he's patronising now, but he'll grow out of it later on. Like he sort of begins to understand the error of his ways, and no. Or if it's like an author who only sort of knows what like British, I would guess more accurately English people say, but like they don't really get it contextually. Like, speaking purely about the English, I can't speak for anybody else, but bird is not a term of endearment. It's not used by decent guys. Like, especially not in this day and age. It's not a term he uses again, but alongside him calling her darling over and over again when she tells him not to call her that and to call her by her name, it does not paint a good picture of him. Like, they need a reason to start as enemies, yes, but for me, there are better ways of going about it, especially when we have his perspective as well. It might be better if we just had Adeline's perspective, so the not great first impression is what she's seeing and feeling, rather than we know that's just a character trait of him being an insufferable git. And like I said, thankfully, he somewhat grows on me as we go through. Not a huge amount. He's not my favourite like romantic interest I've seen in a book like this, but whatever, that's not the end of the world. But the patronising kind of bastard he is, especially early on, it's just like, not for me, thank you. And again, they're going to be bickering and arguing at the beginning. It's an enemies to lovers type book. But does it have to be like this? And he comes further into her cabin, realising that she was staying in her car for a good reason. Like, even without knowing the context of the cat shenanigans, like, he can just see that the place is a state. And he also makes another random dig at her regarding her, like, having lived off of daddy's money. And it's just like, that could have been an inside thought. But that's the sort of thing where you go, enemies to lovers, he's being a dick, and he'll grow out of that. That's fine. I'm allowed to be annoyed at a character for being a dick. I'm not criticising en masse here, I'm criticising Cameron. I'll forward you Lazy Elk Lodge's contact information when I'm back in my cabin. The one I was given. Ring them and say you're calling on my behalf if you want them to act faster. Ask them to refurbish the cottage. Her lips popped right open, shaping a wide O. Now listen, this one isn't giving ventriloquist dummy, but it is, how do I put this? You know Jinx, the Pokemon? I'll put it up here. Here's Jinx. That feels like a polite way of putting the image I have. Do with that what you will. Her hand hesitated, but then she snatched the phone from my grasp, her fingers grazing the back of my hand briefly, but managing to make me notice the touch. Her cheeks flushed and she said, gaze cast down, I still don't trust you, and if this is some way to play some tricks or pranks on me, She trailed off for a second. Something crossed her expression. Save yourself the trouble. The blood in my veins froze. Look up at me, please, I told her, and my voice was low and deliberate. Do I look like some dumb college boy to you? That blush turned to an intense shade of pink. She frowned, but shook her head. Do I look like I have nothing better to do than play little pranks on you? I stepped closer, making sure she met my gaze. She gave me another shake. That's right, because I might not like you, and you might not like me in return, but I promise you, Adeline, I'm too old to waste my time in pointless things like tricking you for sport. Her throat worked, dragging my eyes there for an instant. I returned my gaze to hers. I only play when there's something worth winning, so save your number in my contacts and hand over the phone. The sooner you realise this is all Green Oak has to offer, the sooner you'll be out of this town. And this is an interaction that for sure works better because this is fiction. One of those, like, if a real man spoke to me like this, I might have to throw hands, but it does work here. It's a good setup for their dynamic as we shift from enemies to lovers. They're still in that enemies territory here. They're still standoffish at this point, but we have, a kind of stern gentleness from Cameron that you can see easily fitting really well into a dynamic where they genuinely do care for each other later on. Chapter 8, Adeline. Adeline finds out that she's been shut out from her account with the Miami team. She also properly meets Maria for the first time, beyond like being handed an ice pack and sort of gone, oh look, it's you, the bird assassinator woman, or whatever it is. And they get to have a nice little chat. We learn here about Brandy the goat, who is blind and anxious, and she comes up a few times. Maria's father runs a farm, so that's why we have a goat going on here. It's worth just pointing out that like Brandy is Maria's goat, and it's one of the things that kind of connects Adeline and Maria. Adeline's mother has also found out why she's away. Her father didn't want her mother knowing. She doesn't want her mother worrying though, so she tells her like it's all fine, it's completely fine. And she also talks to her dad, who is beyond dismissive towards her. It's just like, he's such a dick. But it's really clear that at this point she still really admires him and she still really looks up to him. But from an outside perspective, you can see that he's just a bit of an arsehole. And after that call, she doesn't really have time to think about it because despite the fact that she sat at the bleachers during practice, Adeline can't hear a peep out of the girls. Like, it's too quiet. These are a bunch of under 10s. If they're not making a noise, something is going wrong. And then a sudden cacophony of sound comes from the supply shed. She gets there as quick as she can, and as she does get there, the silence returns as the kids know they've been caught. Thankfully, nobody's hurt, though. The girls are clearly still somewhat wary of Adeline, though, so, the mascot video probably didn't help with that as well. So, as she's trying to figure out how to pry a cone off Maria's head, Cameron shows up. Chapter 9, Adeline. Cameron does manage to get the cone off Maria before he and Adeline get back to their bickering. It's fun, and I like that it feels fun. Like, it's clear that they don't get on, but the balance is struck nicely between argument and almost playfulness. It's clear that Armas understands how to transition from enemies to lovers. She knows how to work that dynamic, and I think that's important to know because I've seen her work with other dynamics, clearly. I think the first one was fake dating, if I recall. Again, it's been a while. The second one was definitely fake dating as well. Like, they're going on these different types of fake dating dynamics. But, like, in the first one, it was both. It was enemies to lovers and fake dating. In the second one, it was just fake dating. And in this one, we have pure enemies to lovers. And it's nice to see that she knows how to make that dynamic work. Josie bursts in, letting them know it's a code yellow, which just means that the parents are here, inevitably to be a pain in the backside, and that is confirmed when we find out that they've seen the video of Adeline going for the mascot. Chapter 10, Cameron. It is very clear that Josie is on scramble mode to show the cleanest, most bestest image to the parents she's talking to, and Adeline definitely got the memo, even if she is a little frazzled. Cameron is there. Like, either he's oblivious or fully just doesn't care. I feel like it's a little bit of both, but the two parents are PTA president and vice president, and they have exactly as much, like, Karen energy to, play into a cliche there, but it's that kind of energy. They have as much of that as you'd expect, and it's not the most interesting scene, I'll be totally honest, but it does exist just to let us know that this is a small town, not interested in someone flashing their money about, which that's apparently happened before with the Vasquez farm, which does come up later, and it also comes up that it's not just a Vasquez farm, that, like, there is somebody helping the town out, but nobody knows who. Again, that comes up later. Once the parents leave, Adeline and Cameron are left alone, and she tells him that she's willing to pay him, even if it's not much, so that he'll continue to coach the kids. She knows the parents trust him far more than they do her, and they need to be a pair, even if neither of them like that. And he agrees, and it's a fun time. until we get back on him calling her darling again. It's so patronising. And it's not just that it is patronising, because it might be fine, but she explicitly keeps telling him, don't do it. She doesn't like it. And it's just like, he keeps doing it. Like, and I remember putting in my notes that I was like, I'm sure later down the line she'll be really into it or whatever. And I'm just like, but it feels like he's worn her down more than the fact that she actually is into it now. But he's also got her a little set of camping stuff, so she's not sleeping in her car. He also says that he doesn't want money. He doesn't need to be paid for the coaching. What do you want then? For you to stop being so absolutely exasperating. She frowned like she didn't understand. Jesus bloody Christ, she was going to drive me up the closest hill. Take the goddamn box. The mattress in your cabin is infested, Adeline. Her chin lifted. I'm not accepting charity from you. I can handle myself, unlike everyone thinks. I'm not some pampered brat who can't survive in this place. I just need you to coach the team. Charity? I couldn't help but hiss. Her expression wavered, but there was something in her face. Something that had to be motivating her to act so proud, distrustful of me. Thing was, I didn't care. This is not goddamn charity, Adeline. It's human decency. Listen, I do really like this interaction on the whole. They're both being kind of belligerent, but both of their positions make sense. It's like, we understand where her character is coming from at this point. She is a bit belligerent about not accepting any help, but he's just like, we also know at this point that he's kind of selfish. He's only helping her because it's something that she clearly needs. It's not out of the goodness of his heart or anything. Cameron is just trying to be semi-decent, but he can't pretend like he hasn't been treating her like a brat and a spoiled princess at the same time. And, she's not behaving entirely unreasonably. He's hardly going to have been the first person to treat her like a spoiled princess, so she's going to be a little reactive, but at the same time, you can still accept acts of kindness. But a good show of their dynamic isn't what caught my eye at all. I think I'm going to have to make it my personal mission to ban authors from using the word hiss until they can figure out how to use it properly. Because if someone can tell me how you hiss the word charity without just doing a Gollum impression, I'd really appreciate it. I guess maybe that shh sound can be a bit like a shh sound, so sh and s, they're you can hiss a sh sound as much as you can. I'm really sorry how this is going to sound. So a ch and a sh, all that, they sound similar enough, right? But you can go charity. But how are you hissing that? A hiss is a really particular sound. It's either a s or a sh or a kind of sounds like that breathy, in the back of the throat. It can also be a hiss. But what do you mean? Oh, Gollum loves his charity. Is that what you mean? Charity. I don't know how to do it without doing a Gollum impression. Anyway. Turning around, I headed for the driver's door. I was so done with that woman. I'll tell everyone, she said from her spot at the rear of my truck. If you don't coach the girls, I'll tell the whole town who you are. Chapter 11. Adeline. Adeline tells Josie about what she did right at the end of the last chapter. She's flat panicking, but Josie just looks up at her and laughs. She does the same when Adeline tells her about bumping into Cameron with the car, so it's clearly not really a big deal to anybody but Adeline. We learn here that Josie has been engaged 4 times, and this is the scene that made me forget that Josie is under 30, and that stuck with me for the rest of the book. She's got an auntie feeling to her. Specifically, she feels like an auntie to Adeline. She could be twice her age, and I wouldn't bat an eyelid about that. And by this point, I found myself overall having a pretty good time with this book. It was sort of here where I was already having a pretty good time, but the first few chapters were a bit rough, but I was beginning to enjoy myself by this point. Were it a film, I probably wouldn't be actively watching it, but it would be good in the background while I work. It likely wouldn't be so good or bad that I stop what I'm doing all the time to make sure I'm paying attention, but I wouldn't be wanting to just turn it off. You know, it's definitely easier to get through than the Spanish love deception, but I am generally seeing that I find more issues with this than with the American roommate experiment, that's for sure. A large hand was flying in front of my face. A palm that ended in 5 long and strong fingers, some crooked, and a pinky wearing a signet with a C placed something right beside the macaron tray. Listen, at least it's not paw-sized hands, but it's not great. It's just so waffly. Like, obviously I understand why we're going to focus on his hands. This is a book with explicit scenes in it, and even if it weren't, this is a book where we're expecting that the characters are, like, interested in each other in an intimate manner. That made me sound like some Victorian, you know what I mean? But this is so bulky. Like, this is a slow burn book. We have plenty of time to figure out what his hands look like in detail. We do not need a palm that ended in 5 long and strong fingers. That's such a weird way to describe a hand. That feels like how I would describe, like, if I had to do... What's that thing where you know, like, a police description? Where, like, you have an artist reconstruction of something, like, you describe somebody's face and they recreate it like that. I feel like the way she's done a description of his hand is like if I needed an artist's impression of a hand for a police report. It's not good. But what he has put down is the activity brochure for all, like, the summer and fall activities that the town is holding in the upcoming weeks. And, you know, naturally he's signed her up for every single one of them from that point until the end of autumn. And when she's like, "You did what?" she squeaks. And again, I know I've brought this up before, but I don't get the squeaking thing. Have I been on tea too long? Do Americans squeak more? Like, I just don't think I've ever heard a grown adult woman squeak. But she soon gets him back with a, "Well, if I'm doing this, so are you" kind of thing. And it's a good classic rom-com setup. It's an easy way to, you know, set up the way they'll be bonding outside of work, you know. Even if it's done at the most, like, writing-wise, like, with her writing skills, even if it's done at the most basic level, it should be fun enough. And it is. The activities that they do create some good scenes. Chapter 12, Adeline. And we very quickly get on to their first activity, which is goat yoga. But before we get there, we do get some Cameron info. He went on to play for clubs based in London, Manchester and Glasgow, and was called twice for England's national team early on in his career. 5 years ago, when his prominence started fizzling out, he made the jump across the Atlantic and came to play for the LA Stars. Ah yes, London, Manchester and Glasgow are 3 places where it really doesn't matter which team you play for. Don't worry, I'm just being petty. I know why she isn't naming real teams, but it's like, I don't know. I guess I'm using an American equivalent here because I think I just assumed that En Masse was, because a lot of how stuff is based in America. But it's like saying he played for a baseball team in New York. That's very particular to a lot of people. Do you know what I mean? It makes a difference. At least tell us his colours. Like, the implication of that gives us enough, because I would know a lot about him if I found out that he played, like, if he's playing for a Glasgow team, the difference between him playing in green or in blue is huge. Also, I really hope this isn't real people fanfic. Again, I've never been able to tell if En Masse is a fanfiction writer, because even if she isn't, she writes like one. But to me, it sounds a bit like it could be about Beckham's career, and I really hope not. Again, I'm not accusing her of this, but if you do write real people fanfiction, get in the bin and delete your AO3 or Wattpad account. Get rid of any of your fanfiction website accounts. If you write real people fanfiction, you are grim and disgusting. I have no time for people who write real people fanfiction. That's foul. Anyway, for the yoga, Cameron is in some, like, tight... Again, like I said, I'm not accusing En Masse of saying... Sorry, I'm not accusing En Masse of writing real people fanfiction and saying that's what it is. I'm saying, oh god, I really hope it's not that. Because if it is... Never get published again. If that's what this is, never get published again. Any of yous that write like Harry Styles fanfiction and get that published, I know really quickly people had like Taylor Swift and Travis, is it Kelsey? Is that how you say it? Travis Kelsey fanfiction have had that published. It's like, have you all considered just getting an AO3 account and a real job? Because you do not need your shitty fanfiction published really, really quickly or at all. Write normal books. Anyway, I'm off track. Who'd have thought? It's me. Hi, I'm the problem. It's me. Sorry, it's just because I've just mentioned Taylor Swift. Anyway, for the goat yoga, Cameron is in some like tight workout gear, and you know, she's looking at him disrespectfully. His pecs are like very present, and she has got her eyes locked on, and like, I'm glad that neither of them pretend, even to themselves, that the other isn't like physically attractive. You know, they might not have reached compatibility personality wise yet, but that's fine. I see a lot of it like with this dynamic where they really badly fake that the other isn't easy on the eye, and it's really boring if I'm honest. So like, sure, when you're not vibing with someone's personality, you might not be wanting anything from them, but neither of them are blind. Like, even if it is literally just like, he has ginormous pecs, love that for him, love that for me, I love being able to see them, but also you're a bit of a dickhead, great. You know what I mean? Like, so many of these books, it's like, I'm not even attracted to him, tee-hee-hee, like, fucking tsundere bullshit. They're not pretending that the other isn't, like, a physically attractive person. And I like that. I'm really happy about that. So Maria, the little girl, like, the sort of proxy leader of the football team, she comes over to Adeline, like, with a goat in arms, and this is the blind, nervous goat that she told Adeline about earlier. And in that pure, unfiltered way that kids do, she tells Cameron that he's not cool enough to hang out with them, and she should hang out with him, that he should like hang out with her equally uncool brother. It's a cute little moment, and we do meet her brother later on, and he is just like a bit of a nervous, awkward teenager. It's kind of sweet, but yeah, like it's also just like a really like, aww. Kids are like, oh bless him. She writes, for the most part, there is one scene later on, but for the most part, Armas does write the kids pretty well in this. Like, they aren't in it a huge amount, and obviously it is Maria doing most of the talking, but she does characterize her really well, and she doesn't just characterize her as child. She does have a personality. And we also find out that this nervous goat will badly shit herself if she's startled by any loud noises. Which, to be fair, just like me, babes. Why did I say that? It's not true. But anyway, it's clear foreshadowing, and I thought it was foreshadowing for this scene, but she holds out on that for later. A snort came from my right, and when I glanced in the direction of the sound, I found Cameron and his stupid skin tone. Stupid sexy Flanders is all I can think of right now. Sorry. A snort came from my right, and when I glanced in the direction of the sound, I found Cameron and his stupid skin-tight thermal with his eyebrows up. My smile fell. So that really is your smile, he said, shifting his gaze forward. He lifted his arms, stretching the length of his body and bringing my attention to the new muscles that were being delineated by the fabric of his shirt. I swallowed. Yeah, no wonder. Making an effort to rip my eyes off his chest, I settled them on his left ear. No wonder what? There's nothing wrong with my smile. I returned my attention to Josie, who was leading the group through a stretch. I was smiling for Brandy, not you, and she liked it just fine. Isn't Brandy blind? He asked. My cheeks flushed. While it feels a little like they're actually flirting and having cute banter a bit suddenly, I'm not against it. Like I said before, they've both really been eyeing each other up, and even if they wouldn't say as much to the other person, they're both in like skin-tight fitted yoga clothes. Even if no skin is showing, it leaves little to the imagination. I think them actually having like an albeit catty flirt works for me. I think that works really nicely. I think it's still like fitting within their dynamic. This scene, I did remember going, oh, that started a bit quick. Like, they suddenly started flirting, but I'm not against it. I feel like they're still being bitchy with each other. And Adeline isn't great at the yoga, and during one stretch she like catches Cameron looking at her, and her instinct is like to assume that he's judging her for not doing the stretches all that well. And sure, there might be a bit of that, but like, girl, you were ogling him at most like 5 minutes ago because of his like athlete body in tight clothes. Perhaps consider that he is also checking you out. And that's not book criticism, by the way. That's just like a, girl, come on, get with it. That's one of those things that as you're reading, you're going, really? Come on, bestie. But again, not an en masse criticism. If anything, I'm engaging with the book, as you should be engaging with the book. So it's a compliment. And one of the goats damn near knocks Adeline over, like damn near knocks her to her face, but in a classic sort of little rom-com moment, she gets a good strong pair of hands on her shoulders, stopping her from fully just eating shit on the floor and landing on her face. And of course, those cans are Cameron's. Those hands are Cameron's. Curious about that reaction preceded by the bloody goats, I looked over my shoulder, finding his face right there, so close that I could see the slight wrinkles around his eyes, the specks of brown in the green of his eyes, the smooth-looking texture of his skin. Okay, Buffalo Bill, calm down. Like, also, after all of the sanding, nobody is smoother than my favourite ventriloquist dummy. And we get, as you know, as you might have guessed by that bloody goats, we get our first inkling that Cameron just isn't a huge fan of them, and it does come up a bit more later on. It's not a huge plot thing, he just doesn't really like them. It's just a bit of an inane character point. Again, not a criticism of the book, it's just a thing. It's fine. And given that Adeline is struggling, Josie tells Cameron to help her out. Neither of them are quick to obey that, but Cameron is, you know, he's somewhat more willing. And I think that's because he clocks onto what that means a bit quicker than she does. So the rest of the scene is like, it's what you'd expect. While it's nothing explicit, it's very much an excuse to him for, it's very much an excuse for him to have his hands on her, like, for their bodies to be really close and really intimate. Like, we see the fact that they're slowly, at this point, it's still slowly getting closer to the lover's side of the enemies to lovers dynamic. And he says when he's first helping her out, "You need me," and it very clearly sets up what their more explicit dynamic is more likely to be. And again, we saw that earlier where he's being like gentle but stern with her. We can see how their more explicit dynamic is likely to be. And without it feeling overly creepy or overbearing, he's clearly in control. It's what many authors, looking at you, E.L. James, think they're doing. The difference is how much Adeline is very clearly into this. It's not a sexual moment, but there's a clear energy and electricity between them. Like, he is in control of her, but it doesn't feel like I'm going, run. Like, as soon as he doesn't have his hands on you, get out and run. It's an actual dynamic setup, which I really love seeing. Like, she's telling herself, it's nothing, it's just yoga, nothing else is happening here. He's not trying anything, he's just helping. He doesn't even like me. And it's like, yeah, keep telling yourself that, babes. I'm sure that up close and personal, just to make sure your form is good, is what he's got going on. And it is a very different scene to what I expected. I expected something a bit more sort of Bridget Jones, like, we almost got that earlier, you know, where she nearly ate shit, but it's not a complaint. This was a really fun scene, and, you know, it's saucy, but it's not explicit, and shows how their dynamic will be for the explicit scenes later on. And I also didn't get that, like, other people can see what you're doing, stop it feeling that I've had before, because, like, yes, it's a bit saucy, but it all comes from what Adeline is feeling, rather than, like, we're being told that dirty things are happening. Like, they're not being explicit in front of everybody. They are literally just doing yoga, but it's literally like she's feeling the sensations of his closeness, of his hands on her. They're very, like, they might as well be skin to skin because she's wearing tight yoga clothes, you know. that icebreaker Uber scene will never leave my nightmares, and I wish it would, but this is not like that, and I am so grateful for that. Chapter 13. Cameron. So, Cameron's had a pretty regular, i.e. chaotic, time trying to coach the girls, and he goes to talk to Adeline afterwards. It's clear that she's actually intent on taking things seriously with the team, and, you know, that is in complete opposite to him, who it's just like, oh, it's kind of a thing I'm doing for a friend, because, you know, fuck them kids, I guess. She's suggesting they have weekly meetings about the girls' strengths and weaknesses, checking in on their progress, and he's just not that interested, saying they're just kids, as if taking care of kids' interests isn't something to take in any way seriously. And this isn't gone into enough for my liking, the way that he does just disregard them. I think I mentioned this previously, but it just feels like he suddenly starts to like working with them. I can't remember if that's something I've spoken about before. I remember scripting that later on. Difficulties with this taking quite a while. But it's just like, it does feel like he suddenly just enjoys working with them because he likes working with Adeline. So it's just like, I blinked slowly. We don't need meetings. They're just kids. They are, she nodded, still holding the binder in the air. And they are also qualified for a regional Little League that will be starting in less than a week. Her lips pursed. Did you know that the only reason the Green Warriors made it through is because they're the only under-10 team in the whole country? No, I hadn't known. They still are just kids. Wednesdays it is, she said. And it's like, Cameron, have some perspective challenge, maybe? Like, imagine if the adults around you didn't care to work with your own love of football. Do you think you would have any success? And yes, there is obviously plenty of people, it's like, oh, but I wasn't really catered to, but I worked in spite of that. But that's usually people like school teachers or maybe even family members. It's not usually the people teaching you how to play the sport, how to get better at the sport. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm willing to bet that he was playing in some capacity when he was their age, maybe for an under-10s team, or playing for a school team. Like, I don't know, like I said, fuck them kids, I guess. Also, do Americans not do round-robin style tournaments for their sporting leagues? Like, there's an explanation here where she's explaining that the league is like points based, but everyone still faces each other once. Like, that's how leagues work. Like, with football, at least in England, I'm pretty sure everyone faces everyone definitely once, and I believe twice. I believe that every matchup has each team having a home and an away game. Don't quote me on that. I've not been into football for a very long time. But, like, how else does a league work? Like, yeah, it is still points based, but it doesn't matter who you beat. It's about how many points you get at the end. Like, I'm just getting Continental Classic flashbacks. Like, for some people, we're just so confused at how the point system works there, and there weren't even that many people in each, like, block. But it's not that difficult to keep track of, or even if not keeping track, it's not that difficult to understand. Like, I only don't actively keep track of, say, the G1 because there are so many people in that. But if you're, say, watching football, and also, like, unless I find someone to follow where it's easily laid out in English, does make things a bit more difficult. But were I to be following football, it's not that difficult to see. And at the end of most, like, televised matches, you can see the league and how it changes it. But anyway, I just don't understand why. I need somebody to explain to me how Americans League work, because I'm confused. Americans League? American Leagues. Anyway. she is trying to have a serious conversation with him about the league, about uniforms and all that, and all he can do is stare at her chest and think about how he's had his hands all over her doing yoga. And it's like, can you pull your mind out of the gutter for 5 minutes? I'm not saying that minds never wander, especially when it comes to that sort of thing, but it's like, can you think with the brain in your skull, please? I would appreciate it. It's just weird. It's like, you are in a semi-professional environment. Can you not stare at this woman's tits, please? And yes, but it's a romance, and to some extent it's an erotica. Or at least it's a romance with explicit scenes in it. Yes, there are going to be some moments where they're like staring at each other and, you know, checking each other out. But there's still a time and place. And as she gets up to leave, she trips up and lands directly on him. And I'm not bothered about how much he uses the word bloody when he's talking, but after berating her for insisting on always wearing the heels, he says, "You're going to break your bloody neck one of these goddamn days." And I cannot explain to you just how annoying the word goddamn becomes the further we get into the book. It's a clear, has an editor not noticed this type thing, because it becomes constant. I know I bring it up later on when it really starts to become noticeable, because I'm sure I will also become repetitive talking about it if I'm not careful. If I end up doing a kind of, every time it comes up, I end up being repetitive. But it's just, I'll get into more detail with it later when it comes up more, but it becomes really annoying. As much as anything, it just feels like it's not something that he would say. I don't know how many times I say, "Oh, god damn." I don't know how often those words come out of my mouth, and I know I'm somebody who favours, you know, I am somebody who swears a fair amount, so like, god damn it. I just, it felt really unnatural for him, but like I said, I'll get more into that later. And you know what? For his behaviour in this scene, and him not taking these children's joy seriously, he deserves her doing a shit British accent at him, saying, and I am going to have to do what Americans usually sound like doing a British accent. So he's like, "Those bloody heels, mate. Bollocks in it. I'm chuffed to bits. Fancy a cuppa." There's a particular way they all do it, and it usually does sound like that. Usually, like, it sounds like they've got something in their mouth when they're doing it. But is it annoying? Yes. Is it a crude stereotype? Yes. But he has been a pain in the arse up to now, and he needs some humbling somehow. And to be clear, I think this is funny on purpose. I am laughing at it, not. Sorry, I am laughing with it, not at it. It's just a bit of silly fun. Chapter 14, Adeline. After doing some more building work on the cottage, which she does not own, Adeline, look, could you imagine going to a Travelodge and, like, going at the furniture with tools just because it's subpar? No, you make a complaint and find somewhere new, or in Adeline's case, put your pride aside and use the camping stuff that Cameron's given you. Look, it's just like, this isn't your space. You haven't bought this. You are renting it, and I understand it is not in a good enough condition to be selling out to people, to be renting out to people, but he's given her a number of somebody to get hold of, to have this dealt with. She hasn't done it because of her pride. She hasn't been using the camping equipment because of her pride. It's like, what? This isn't your place to do this with. Anyway, Adeline gets a text from her friend Matthew and finds out that her Lady Birdinator face from the video is being used in cartoon form by some indie energy drink company. And she wonders if she/her father/his company could maybe sue, but the conversation doesn't go much further than that. It's something that sort of comes up later on, but it's never something that's properly addressed, not in a good way or a bad way. It's sort of one of those where it's like, it's saying enough that it doesn't really get dealt with, rather than it being an over the top thing. And I think that's quite nice. It's quite a bit of subtlety. And Cameron comes over and sits by her. She's out on her porch. And, you know, it's slightly catty small talk until he returns to his favourite question of asking why she's in Green Oak anyway. And it quickly turns to her realising that she does not have a life outside of work. She doesn't really hang out with people, and she hasn't really got any hobbies either. On the other hand, we find out that Cameron is a massively outdoorsy type. He loves hiking, camping, and all of that. And he's also into things like meditation and yoga. And we've already seen that he's quite into yoga. He's also someone who's happy to try all sorts. Mostly it seems to distract himself, keep his mind off things, you know, and... Wait. Hang on. No. Oh, Mass, what's that? He lifted one of those paw hands in the air. Right, fuck that, I'm done. You know what? End it here. End the video here. No more of that. Elena, I was having a good time. This is a good scene, and generally with this book, I am having a good time overall. And you hit me with this? How dare, I can't fucking believe this. Not to track back to the Spanish love deception, but paw-sized hands and paw hands as descriptors don't mean anything. There is an implication, sure, but lots of animals have paws. My cats have paws, bears have paws, and creatures of various sizes in between all have paws. And sure, a big man probably got big hands, probably more like the bear paws, but I'll hold on to the joy of Wardlow, but he has tiny raccoon paws till the day I die. God bless having friends with Photoshop skills. I'm so annoyed. Like, while not being great, I still really like this scene overall. It's not perfect, but I enjoy it. You know, I'm not a huge fan of the way he refers to her most of the time, but I can see the dynamic she's forming. Overall, I like what this scene is doing. It's just that the paw hands gave me flashbacks. You know, we learn more about Cameron while we don't know what from. He's still letting us know that he is doing what he can to distract himself from something. And we know that Adeline has been doing the same with her work, but really she should try hobbies as well. They're learning they have more in common, you know, with each other than either of them would probably like to admit. But the paw hands... and I'm just supposed to be okay with that. I'm supposed to just... So many animals have paws. And there is an implication. Sure. Again, we know he's basically Bigfoot. So, yes, I understand that. But he could still be a big man with little hands. Plenty of tall men have little hands. For shame. Chapter 15. Cameron. So, on the day of the Warriors' first match, we find out that the girls are stuck in uniforms from the 80s. It's frustrating, but there is nothing to be done for this match. But it has got Adeline all stressed out. They do look ridiculous, and Chelsea once again won't take her tutu off. This time, he is just right. He is right about them just being kids, though. They're having fun, and they don't really seem to mind. Cameron is somewhat comforting, but he remains playful and a bit jokey with her. It's clear that they're moving towards actually getting along. The bickering feels lighthearted. They're playing off each other, they're having fun, and it's nice to see the tensions begin to fall down. And no, the game itself doesn't go well, but it's only one game in the whole league. They have time. Chapter 16. Adeline. We're at an end of summer fair type event. I don't know what to call it. Maybe fete would be a better word for it. You know, we got food, drinks, music. It's a big get together by the lake. Josie has Adeline and Cameron on the beer stand, and this is one of those events that they sort of volunteered each other for a little while back. Cameron is becoming more and more attractive to Adeline while they work, and not wanting to accept these feelings, she finds a moment to bolt and hide from him. In her hiding spot, she finds Brandy, who's the nervous blind goat who joined her for the yoga. But it doesn't take long for Cameron to find the two of them, and they're soon joined by another goat, Tilly. Cameron clearly gets uncomfy. He's got a real gripe with goats. He just doesn't like them. And he never really properly explained it. It just seems like he doesn't really like goats at all. But the two of them have a gentle moment talking about grandparents, Cameron having been particularly close to his grandmother, who he says is his nonna because she's Italian. They're genuine with each other. It's no cheap jabs, or it's not even like banter with each other. It's just a genuine moment of kindness. And I think these are the things that we want to see. I really liked this scene because it's like a nice lull before it picks up to being a bit silly again. He even gives her a jacket to keep her warm, though her ventriloquism doll expressions do join us again, which is a little annoying, but we've not seen the dummy in a while, so it's like seeing an old friend, but it's not too distracting. It was a bit silly for me, I think, because I'd noticed them early on. I was noticing them more often, but if you're a reader who doesn't really care about like the more sort of cartoonish expressions that do show up in a fair amount of books like this, then that's not gonna get to you. But like I said, this is a sweet, quiet, calm before the storm. Sweet, quiet, calm before the storm type moment. In the distance, the music came to an abrupt stop that was followed by one loud and boisterously clattering sound, as if an instrument had fallen to the ground and shattered. We both started to turn, but a distressed bar stopped us. It was loud and just as boisterous, and it was also Brandy, losing her ever-loving goat mind. My arms reached out in her direction. "That's okay, Brandy," I said in what I hoped was a soothing tone. "You're fine. That was just a little scare, but you're okay, I promise." But Brandy wasn't okay, and she wasn't soothed either. Her head swayed side to side and her paws hit the ground back and forth. First of all, goats don't have paws, so note that down. Second of all, I'm glad we didn't go on too long with the Brandy is definitely going to shit herself in a hectic way foreshadowing. It's hardly a big plot point to make us sort of wait for, as it were, even if we know it's coming, but it's the sort of thing where either it's going to happen right at the end and you're like, did we need to wait for this? Or, she does it soon enough where it's like, yeah, that's fine. We knew it was coming. Good. But yeah, Brandy is running around violently shitting herself. And, of course, Adeline ends up falling on her ass right in it. It's a classic rom-com scene and it works really well. It's fun and ends with Brandy running towards the water, and given she's blind, this can't go well. So Adeline gets in to help her. It's a great chapter. We have we have them bantering and we have her going, "Oh no, he's attractive." Shit. I know I've already thought about this before, but maybe it's becoming a bit more than just he's physically attractive. No, it's definitely just that he's physically attractive. Shit, so she runs. It's great. And then we have that moment of kindness. It's a nice rise and fall in the energy. It works really nicely. I think it's a great chapter. Chapter 17, Adeline. We move to the two of them in a meeting together. They're back to bickering, this time about uniforms. She sends pictures regarding these uniforms to Matthew, to her friend, to prove a point, but she realised that she must have accidentally got Cameron in one of those pictures, and Matthew fanboys and is not normal about it at all, but he doesn't know how to be normal for the entire rest of the book. And, listen, I understand being a fan of someone, but you can still know how to behave yourself. I've been to plenty of Comic-Cons, met people who I adore watching their stuff. I've met wrestlers, actors, all sorts of kind of people. People who I have watched most of my life. I have met a couple of actors from Red Dwarf who I've watched that since I was definitely too young to be watching it. But I've been watching it a really long time. And I was normal about it because that's how you behave. There are people who I can be huge fans of. Doesn't mean I have to be weird about it. Anyway, as Cameron has to walk away to take a call, Maria comes over to tell Adeline that the shed is being fixed up. Maria's father and brother have taken that one on. And we find out that her brother is a huge football fan. And it's clear that when he walks over, that he's never met Maria's coach before, because he recognises Cameron. Adeline stops this brother before he can out Cameron's name, and while Maria and her brother are being typical siblings going at each other, Adeline realises that honestly she's just kind of exhausted. And I really like the soft gesture of Cameron sort of delicately, that didn't sound like delicately, but fine, of him delicately putting a hand on her back and just getting her to a car. It's a really small act, but it's clear how they're getting closer. You know, he wouldn't have been so genuine, kind and delicate with her just a few weeks ago, probably a few days ago, so it's, you know, it's nice. Chapter 18, Adeline. The two of them pull up to the Vasquez farm, which is Maria's family, and it's for another of the, summer, autumn events. Well, he pulls up to find Adeline already there, and she's holding a broken-heeled shoe. She storms in before him and is instantly greeted by Josie, who's like, "You're not going to be good wearing that. This event is literally called Muddy and Mighty." And, you know, Adeline continues to whine that, "Oh, my clothes are fine. Like, will you just pull your head out of your arse for just a second? I am so bored of her insisting on wearing fucking high heels and power suits for a job in the middle of nowhere. Fine at first when she arrived because she was unprepared, but by now it's just dull. We know she has some brains in there, so I don't understand why she can't suck it up and be a little bit practical. Hell, she can stick with her vibes. I'm sure she can order some nice boots and a big coat, but no, we have to be all pointlessly, I can do this, it's fine." And it's just pointless. Be practical, for God's sake. Like, she can still have her, like, suited and booted kind of vibes. Like, she could have got some practical boots that look good. She could have got herself a big coat. And she should have got herself some clothes that she can wear if she needs to be in a dirty situation. She's been, like, messing up her cottage. And I'm sure she's not been doing that in her power suits. Anyway, Josie pulls her away and finds her something more suitable, which ends up being like pink overalls and a pair of trainers. And obviously that is not her vibe, but Adeline knows it's her best and frankly only option. And, you know, I'll be honest, that sounds like a pretty casual fit for me, but definitely not for her. I have a pair of overalls I need to dye, and maybe pink isn't a bad option. I should go more colourful for that. Thoughts? Anyway, it turns out that this activity is pottery, and because Adeline hasn't done it before, Josie tells Cameron to help her out, like he did with the yoga. And, you know, it's clear from the start that this is going to be like that. It's a way for them to be all sort of up close and personal, and I'm sure there's no reason that Unchained Melody is stuck in my head. Fix the ball to the wheel. I hesitated. That pair of forest green eyes stared right into mine. "Stop overthinking it and fix the ball to the wheel for me, yeah?" I'm really sorry, but there's something about the "fix the ball to the wheel for me, yeah?" that has such, and again, wrestling brain rot, but like, it's got such Gabe Kid cadence. And the idea of that man, pure, just like, and listen, I have no idea what that man's like outside of the ring. I'm purely talking about the man we see on our screens. Him just sitting there for a gentle pottery class is doing me in. Just the image of that, just the idea of him trying something a little bit experimental and just going, "I'm a madman," you know, it's doing me in. Oh, and she has got her lips pressed in a tight line again, so, you know, I guess that is default for the ventriloquist doll, so there's that. But this is a great scene as well. Like, it's exactly as you'd expect. It's all up close contact, especially like hand contact and all that. And, you know, like the yoga, it's saucy, but it's not sexual yet. It's genuinely funny to watch Adeline's brain fly out of the window, as it's definitely not what she's thinking with. And like I was saying before, where I was like, there are going to be moments where you're not thinking with your skull brain, you're thinking with any other part of your anatomy. This is a normal point in time for that. When you're at work, it's not, but this is fine. Like, you can see that she's just like, I'm being so fucking normal right now, and yeah, Poppet, I'm sure you are, I believe you. Thousands wouldn't. And like, there's a great little ooh moment too, with Cameron reached for the sponge again, and his jaw brushed my cheek. My breath hitched. His fell on my temple. You shouldn't be disrupting my train of thought that easily either. The fire on my face spread down my neck, sneaking into the neckline of the overalls. Am I doing that? Cameron produced a sound that made his chest rumble. He grabbed my hands and placed them on the spinning clay. If it's not well centered, he said, increasing the speed of the play and keeping his palms over mine as the material slid beneath my skin. The inside of his thigh pressed on the outside of mine. He felt like a furnace. The whole thing will be off balance. The grammar isn't great here. It's one of those where it's just like, it's fine, I can overlook it. But I love that he's just like, anyway. It's like the first time that he's been overt about finding her attractive. Like, there's no getting around that moment having happened. You can't ignore it. And, you know, it is just out in the open now. And, you know, our Mass loves a slow burn. She's well known for it, and she does do it well. This, however, seems to be our pickup point. Like, yes, it's a rom-com, so there's sure to be some barrier or falling out or whatever in the future. That's usually how these things work. But this is the, well, something's been admitted, even if it's just a little bit. And that's all been done out loud, not just like to ourselves. It's the point from which we will likely see them stick together much better. And like the yoga scene, it is PDA, kind of, but it doesn't feel icky. Amas has done a really good job of capturing this moment without making me think about the fact that there are other people in that room. And on a different note, there's also a really good description of a panic attack at the end of this scene. It's low key and it's an internal thing for Adeline, but it's clear that she's sort of having that thing where, to anybody who knows what's going on, they can see it's that sort of, she's probably just really zoned out, and ironically it's really grounded, and I appreciate that. I've had my fair share of panic attacks in a variety of forms, and honestly, more often than not, for a lot of people, they are going to look like this far more than sort of hyperventilating to the point of passing out. You know, like, I've been there too, but I think it's always good to show this kind of thing properly. I think that would be the right way to say it. Like, I don't enjoy the fact that she's having a panic attack, but I appreciate the fact that it's being shown respectfully. I think that's the right way of saying it. Like, I appreciate that she's showing it respectfully. And when they get outside, Adeline finds that her car has a flat tire and she can't change it. And yeah, Cameron makes a joke, but she's clearly not in the mood. And I appreciate seeing him go, right, it's not the right moment, and just being immediately soft with her, which is clearly what she needs in that moment. He tells her, you know, he'll get her back to the cottage and he'll get it sorted for her. He sees the inside of her place for the first time as well, and it really is an absolute state. Well, he's seen it previously before, but he only saw that before she'd really gone for it, and he's serious but not angry with her when he asks why she didn't ask anyone for help. And I wish it wasn't just like a thought for him that he's like, oh man, I spent a good while calling her a princess who needs daddy's money, because, you know, while she is stubborn, he hasn't helped that. So maybe she could have asked for help from other people, but he did put up somewhat of a barrier as to her asking him in particular. But he storms out of the cabin and he quickly comes back in with a toolkit, puts it down and pulls out a massive hammer and takes out all the frustration he's feeling about having actual romantic feelings for the first time, or at least that's what it implies, out on the bed. He just goes, I don't know how things, right, I'm feeling a lot of things right now, and I'm going to take it out on the bed. Chapter 19, Cameron. We have 2 goddams in the opening pages of this chapter, and it's clear that it's a crutch. Or at least I'm pretty sure that it's a crutch. Like, a way to make sure Cameron sounds like Cameron. But Armas already does that. Her characterization is good. It doesn't mean I'll always like those characters, but they are consistently and clearly themselves. She doesn't need crutches like this. He's obviously Cameron without the goddams. Like I said earlier, I don't mind the slight overuse of bloody as a sort of curse term or whatever, but curse term, you know what I mean? Because it's like, if you're not British, it can be hard to authentically make somebody sound that, and that signals that for people who aren't British, I guess. Like, bloody is always one of those words that's picked up on as a British term, and it signifies that to people, so that doesn't bother me. And he's, thirsting, thinking about Adeline, when he gets a call from his former agent. They're bantering back and forth for a bit until we get to the reason for the call. His agent has been trying to get him, back to public media, some kind of pundit type role, it seems, and it's like we see a lot of former players do. I know that Gary Lineker does it. I'm pretty sure Alan Shearer does the same. But Cameron has no interest. And we'll find out later, but Cameron did have a major breach of privacy when he was still a football player, when he was a public figure. And since then, he has had zero interest in a public life. And, his former agent is also his friend, and we can see that he wants Cameron to take opportunities like this, push himself a bit, but Cameron is happy in his sort of life in the middle of nowhere. But mostly, it would seem, to placate his friend. He says that he'll think about the offer, and soon after the call, he goes to the door to find Adeline there. She's all, ooh, you're half naked and tattered, and we can add another point to the ventriloquist dummy counter because her jaw pops open when he makes a super flirty comment. But Adeline also meets Willow, one of Cameron's cats, when said cat bolts out to go after the rooster Adeline clipped with a car before. Well, actually, she might have met Willow before, because it would seem that she's the one more likely to have, come into a cottage previously. Cameron manages to get the cat before going back to talking with Adeline, and he's sharing that he's got a good knowledge about wildlife, but that quickly turns to thinly veiled flirting. That went fine. And they're getting closer, and it seems like they're about to kiss, but Willow scratches at him before they can. It's a classic Armas bit. She builds tension up and up, and no, not quite yet. It's like edging. Does Willow do this often? I shook my head, barely able to keep the rasp out of an answer with her attention on me like that. I liked it far too much. She's never acted like that, but perhaps that's because I've never given her a chance to be jealous. Jealous? I nodded, my tongue still in twists. My head, too, when all of a sudden I couldn't remember the last time a woman had tended to my wounds. Had it ever happened? Had I ever felt like this? Oh. I like them putting pieces together. The two of them, like him going, oh, I'm appreciating this attention on me. I'm liking what I'm feeling. And her realizing that he's saying to her that, oh, maybe the cat is jealous of her attention. And he doesn't really have that many women around sort of thing. But oh, is so overplayed. I've got no hate to Almas for using it, by the way. I've just seen it so much in fiction itself and spoken about online. I am bored of it. I know it's a fan favourite. That's why I've got no hate for Almas for using it, because I know that people go, oh, it's the thing. And I'm like, how many times do you have to see it before you get bored of it, though? Chapter 20. Cameron. So, after the girls' game, they come to the bench feeling dejected after another loss. And Cameron tries to comfort them, but he doesn't really know how. He basically goes full Braveheart on them. Maria's brother ends up saving the day by suggesting they go and get some snow cones for everyone. And Cameron and Adeline are flirting through the rest of the chapter until her gaze moved behind me. Her expression changed. And just like that, all hell broke loose. Chapter 21. Adeline. So what she saw just beyond Cameron was a guy in a hoodie with the energy drink brand logo on it, the one that used her Lady Birdinator image. It all came back to me then. The fact I'd never gotten an update from Miami. That I didn't know when or if they'd taken legal action. What I knew was that there was a guy with my enraged face on his clothes in North Carolina. So I panicked. My heart dropped to my feet. I felt all my blood leave my face, and I did what I should have probably done that day I arrived in Green Oak, right after I pulled the pin and made my orderly, neat life implode. I ran. Or I tried, because instead I whirled on the bench I was sitting. What? I whirled on the bench I was sitting. What? Oh god, that's awfully written. Or I tried, because instead I whirled on the bench I was sitting, tripped over the water keg, and plunged into the ground, managing to squeeze the takeout cup so hard the lid flew off and the contents spilled all over me. It wasn't pretty, and I was sure I'd gone down with a scream. And Cameron is immediately by her, checking on her, trying to find out what happened. The guy in the hoodie thankfully leaves before anything can happen, or like Cameron can see something weird, because he still has no idea about the video or anything that's come since. He's remarkably offline, just basically completely offline. So he has no idea about the shit she's been through, basically. And when they get back to the cabin, he carries Adeline inside along with a box for her by Matthew, or from Matthew rather. And then the rest of this scene is so weird. Like, I don't know if it's that he's just because he's jealous that he's seen something from a guy called Matthew, but I'm pretty sure he knows of Matthew like now. Like, first of all, we have another ventriloquist dummy expression, so, you know, write that down, whatever. But more importantly, Cameron, like, look, we saw that he's a bit like, I'm having proper serious feelings and I don't understand how to, like, deal with all of that. And that's when he went, like, hog wild on the bed, destroying it. Which, like, fine. I get going hog wild on the bed. And, like, yes, that means that this behaviour isn't 100% unprecedented. But, like, he just out of nowhere goes so caveman. And like I said, I don't know if it's also to do with the fact that he had the box, like, from a man, and he's got that feeling of jealousy and protectiveness or whatever, but it's weird. Like, he's just got a bunch of one-word grunty responses, and she picks up on it. And when he leaves, he's like, good fucking riddance under his breath. And as far as I can recall, he's never like this again. And I don't think it's even really brought up again later on. Like, I thought I'd missed something when this happened. But no, he's all moody and angry about something. Like, he's just suddenly like this, I guess, because he can't deal with the fact he has feelings. And I'm supposed to... Actually, I don't even know how I'm supposed to feel about this as a reader. Am I supposed to be ignoring this weird display and just go back to going, ooh, what a dreamboat? Because I had been genuinely enjoying this book and their dynamic, and I know he's struggling with having feelings, but generally he's been handling himself much better than this. Anyway, once he's stropped off out of the cabin, she opens the package Matthew has sent to her. And again, because Matthew is 100% normal, about Adeline working with Cameron. He's sent her a jersey of Cameron's from his team in LA, wanting it to be signed. I don't know if it is like actually his old jersey or if it's just one of those that you can buy where it's got a player's name on it. She goes for a shower, gets back out, and finds that her clothes had fallen off the sink where she put it, so they've fallen off onto the floor, and that means they've got soaked. So you can take 3 guesses what she puts on instead. And immediately I was like, I'm sure this will lead to a totally normal and not awkward encounter. And she wakes in the night to find that Willow the cat is in her bed, and she's fuzzy with tiredness and the pain in her ankle because when she fell, she sprained it. I can't remember if I said that, but when she fell, her ankle is buggered. That's why he carried her inside. So, she's tired, she's in pain, and she's also on a bunch of painkillers. She ends up sending a voice note to Cameron, knowing that, he's probably worried about his cat, though we don't know what's in that message until the next chapter. Chapter 22. Cameron. A message from Adeline popped up on the screen. A voice memo. With a frown, I hit play. Hey, what's up? Her voice drawled. Something was wrong. Adeline didn't drawl. She also never spoke so weakly, her voice so frail. I came to a stand and looked for my clothes, her voice filling the room. She is here with me. We're sitting on my bed. That's not really a bed. And getting through the storm together. I hope that's okay, because if you don't mind, I'd like to keep her. Just for tonight. Miami storms are much scarier, but she's keeping me warm and distracting me from the pain and the noise outside. And she explains that she's definitely taken one too many painkillers. She also says that back home, she's not sure she had any friends. Maybe I'm not all that friendly or nice. I think you liked me today, but you don't like me all that much, so yeah. Anyways, Willow's with me. Do you think that's okay? I'm sure you have a great lap, but she looks comfy in mine. I blinked at the screen, standing frozen at the side of my bed. The only thing moving was my heart pounding furiously. A new voice memo popped up, kicking me back into gear. I want to clarify, her voice explained when I hit play, that I'm not thinking about your lap. Not too much. But if it's as hard as your chest, it'd explain why Willow likes it there. Because I'm soft and you're hard. A new message appeared. Your lap is hard. Then another one. Not you. A pause. Although you're hard too, I guess. A hard ass. Not your ass, but you. It's your personality that I don't like. This cracked me up. I don't know if you could tell that I'm like stifling in a a little bit of a giggle there. This girl has horny brain rot at the best of times, and add painkillers and exhaustion to that. Yeah, you got the perfect recipe for disaster. It is a really funny scene that he makes his way over to her cabin to check on her, because obviously in that situation you will be like, I've got to make sure this girl's alright. She's going to cause some damage to herself or something. The door is thankfully for him unlocked, so he can just immediately get in. He picks her up for whatever reason, like, yeah, presumably to get her to his place, which is much nicer and not a building site, but like, ask first. Ugh. Of course, he sees that she's in his jersey. Something stirs within him because of that, and I get icebreaker flashbacks. But when she wakes in his arms, it's all very gentle and cute. But when I got to the end of this chapter, I was just like, God, I hope we find out more. Or at least he explains to her why he went all ooga booga caveman on her. Chapter 23. Adeline. Adeline wakes up in that weird state where it's like you wake up somewhere unfamiliar, even if it's comfortable. Like at a hotel, or you're at a friend or family member's, the sort of thing. Like, either you've gone to sleep and woken up somewhere you weren't expecting to, that kind of thing, or like, you know what I mean. But she does quickly realise that she's probably at Cameron's cabin, and she also realises that he's taking care of her until she fell asleep. You know, it's fair to have it's fair for her to be a little hazy on the details, you know. We could tell that she was out of it last night. But she limps her way towards the kitchen / living area where she finds Cameron topless doing yoga, bathed in sunlight. And they go over the previous night and she apologises for being in a state and, "You should have called me." The word left me in a whisper. "Why?" "Because you needed me and I wasn't there with you and I hated that." "And whose fault is it that you weren't there, Cameron? I wouldn't have called you either with the way you were behaving when you dropped her off in the cabin. Like, I'm sorry, have you no self-awareness?" Probably not, because characters like in this kind of book never do. But like, be for real. Oh, and while she's healing up in his place, he repeatedly picks her up to like help her get to places, but a lot of the time he doesn't ask her permission to do this before he does it. And like, this is 100% one of those where I go, this one is a case of book boyfriend fantasy, not in real life, because I think it's one of those where it's like one amping up the idea of being taken care of because she needs it even if she doesn't want it, like less that she doesn't want it, more that she can't admit that, and two, it's another play into their like size difference. Like, I don't really think I have to explain that one. It gives me the ick. And again, I understand that for a lot of people that's like a kind of the idea of a man doing that in a book, it's fine, but the idea of a man doing that in the real world, not fine. And the next few days are a bit of a blur. She's just sort of eating, sleeping, resting. It's very much on repeat, but she finds out that she should be pretty much fully recovered in about 1 to 3 weeks. And she says that she thinks that maybe it's time for her to go back home. Well, like back to her cabin. Like, she doesn't want to feel like she's putting him out. And this is another one where we see the way that her character is, but I think that's a bit more manageable for me to deal with, like, because there's so much of her stubbornness that makes it difficult for me to deal with this character. But in this one where it's like, no, I'll just go back to my own place, I'll just, you know, I don't want to have to put you out. I get that, because I'm a bit like that as well. But from here, she doesn't go back so soon, but she does say that soon. Sorry, she doesn't go back yet, but she does say that she wants to go back soon. And from here, we do start to get more overtly into Adeline's incapability to ask for help or accept help from people. And obviously that's not all at once, but this is where we begin to start talking about that. And also, given that she absolutely cannot walk in her heels anymore, Cameron has sorted her out with some practical wear. She's got some good boots, some warm clothes, all of that good stuff. And look, I have a go at a lot of fictional men for putting their love interests in clothes, but it's usually that's because it's for their benefit. I'm not mad at him here. I've mentioned before that it's like, you could have been fashionable and also practical. You missed that boat. We're here now. You're in your basic sort of outdoorsy clothes, but this isn't for his benefit, it's for hers. She does need new boots. She can't walk in heels on her ankle. And frankly, she needs to accept the help of wearing something warm and give it a rest and be like, I'm fine in my tiny skirt and soft plaid. It's like, hang on, I genuinely feel stupid for this, but I'm pretty sure Miami's in Florida. Yeah, Miami is a city in Florida. Thought so. Florida's hot. Isn't like Florida warm and kind of humid? Isn't that why a lot of old people retire there, because of the weather? So like, yes, your clothes are going to have to be different. Wow, what a surprise. So at this point, I'm just like, oh, thank God she's going to be in something where she's not going to be all like, actually, it's fine. It's all completely fine. And I'm fine. And anyway. He also says that while he's at practice, Josie will be coming over. She's just there to sort of help Adeline out, and also she's gonna be helping her move into Cameron's place, because we've known since the start that Adeline's place isn't fit for purpose. Not least of all now she's injured, but he tells her that it's just while she's healing. She needs help here, no matter how hard that is for her to accept. And through this chapter, we do not get any explanation for his caveman behaviour. And look, we know as readers why he did this. You don't have to read that far between the lines that he doesn't know how to handle his feelings. But doesn't Adeline deserve an explanation? And an apology would definitely be nice as well. Like, it doesn't necessarily mean that we need an explanation, because your readers aren't stupid. They could do with, you know, being trusted, and you do generally trust your readers, but your characters also deserve explanations for things, and it can serve as a bit of a helpful thing for any readers who haven't quite got it, because it's a weird scene. Anyway, it's not that important. It's just annoying, and it's not the sort of thing that I'm likely to be thinking about long term after the book. It's not one of those types of scenes, but it might be the sort of thing where maybe the more I think about this book, the more it gets on my wick, kind of thing. If I think about this book in the future, I'm more likely to think about the ventriloquist thing, though, aren't I? Anyway, chapter 24, Adeline. They're chatting while she does her laundry, and we find out that the girls from the team have made her a card. And, you know, she did worry everyone when she fell, and we get back to him picking her up again. She's more happy for it this time, but it's still very much like giving me the ick. She finds that despite herself, she's settling into this kind of domestic life. The two of them and the cats, they are in a kind of domestic bliss, you know. They're just sort of hanging out, they're eating together, doing laundry, all those sort of mundane little things. But, you know, no matter how settled in she gets, she is still Adeline, and not working has finally got to her. So he fetches the binder and they sit together and go over stuff. It's the first time they've really felt like a team when it comes to work. They've been obviously getting closer in general, but work is often where their bickering really remains, and it's sweet. But this is the point where I'm like, oh, Cameron suddenly just cares about the kids because he cares about Adeline. And I don't even know if he does really care about the kids of the team. I just think he cares about Adeline. But again, you can somewhat look over it. And I know that sounds a bit like, well, should you be looking over this sort of thing? But at the same time, this is not... I know how long I'm going to be talking about this, but at the end of the day, this is the sort of book where it's a bit of a brain off and have a nice time. You can look over that sort of thing. I'm just going incredibly in depth because I have beef with Elena en masse after Spanish Love Deception. Chapter 25, Adeline. Though not being 100% healed, Adeline is ready to start leaving the house and going to work again. And we find that, you know, she still wants to head back to her cabin, but that isn't happening. There's water damage in there, and even if Cameron didn't cause it, he's seemingly made sure it's completely uninhabitable to keep her from going back. And, like, sure, she shouldn't have been living there, but I have read too many toxic man books to not have, like, quiet alarms in the back of my head. Like, he's fine. He's not a 100% red flag type of guy. He's like a good for a book boyfriend type guy. I'm just always on high alert when I'm reading books like this, where it's like, no, your old place isn't good enough. You're stuck with me now. Tell me that Christian Grey wouldn't do that. Anyway, we find out that the new uniforms have arrived, and he also says, fecking hell, and says that he uses that term to make sure he doesn't curse around the girls. And sure, it's a milder curse than fuck, but it's still not polite. Like, I'm assuming this is just like a British person saying things in front of Americans that they wouldn't get. But, like, one, a lot of Irish people went to America, and two, it sounds enough like fuck for it to be obvious. Like, we never, as far as I recall, find out where he's from. Like, we know he's English, but we never find, like, is he from the Northwest? Is he from the Midlands? Is he from the South? Like, and I assume He's a southern boy, I assume he's from London, or sort of that kind of area. Maybe he's a bit more sort of Essex, but he's in that sort of area because he has to be the right kind of English for non-British people to go, oh, well, if he's English, he probably sounds like this. It probably means he's southern. It probably means he sounds like the fella from After in the movie, but what that accent is actually supposed to be. And yes, I know that actor is English, but he also sounds like he's doing a fake English accent, and I'm sure we're all agreed on this. But anyway, the word feck doesn't sound like it belongs to him. Like, I don't mean that like it's an owned word or anything. It's just not the most common in England. Like, I'm from the northwest. I hear it a little bit up here, but to me, it's far more associated with Ireland. It's just, to me, it's a choice, but it's something and nothing really. It's like more important to me that it's like, it's not an alternative to swearing. Like, sure, calling someone a bitch is more polite than calling them a cunt, but like, they're both still unpolite, and you wouldn't say either in front of a child, especially if you're their coach. Anyway, Maria barrels over to Adeline, who tells her she painted 2 of her goats' paws for the get well soon card. Like, one single search of what kind of feet do goats have tells me the answer is cloven hooves. It's not difficult to find. I don't know why this annoyed me so much, but isn't them having cloven hooves part of the reason they're supposed to be evil? Like in myth or biblical kind of ways, isn't the cloven hooves the reason they're evil? I don't know. It's just like, it's so basic. How many farm animals can you name with paws? Herding dogs or like sheepdogs or whatever. They're the only thing I can think of. This is primary school knowledge. I'm not asking for a PhD biology here. How does that get past editors? Do you know what I mean? Anyway, Maria also tells Adeline that there's a surprise waiting for her at the shed, and she finds out that the Vasquezes have been working on it, they've not been making it into a refurbished shed, but instead it's been turned into an office for her. Chapter 26. Adeline. The Green Warriors have managed to score themselves a couple of wins, plus they're all happy with the new uniforms, and to some extent maybe that's helped a little bit. Like, maybe it's not made them go from losers to winners, but it's maybe sort of like helped morale a little bit. And we soon head into the town's Fall Fest. Adeline is chatting to Josie, and of course Cameron ends up coming up, and him having helped pay for and build the office comes up as well. Good, I answered. It's thoughtful and sweet. Her smile widened. And it's also really bad, I added, to which she frowned. I don't know. I can't decide. I'm not used to these things. To things like someone going out of their way for you, slowly earning your trust, taking care of you, flirting, wanting to bang the crap out of, and it cuts off. She gets interrupted. Probably, I don't have the book in front of me, but probably just have it going, Josie, or something like that. And listen, most of that's fine. Josie's a pretty forward speaker, and I certainly have friends I'm like overt with, but there is something about the last line that just made me, just like that, her wanting to bang the crap out of you. It just doesn't feel right to me. It's fine. It's not anything that makes me change my opinions on the character or even the book in general. It's just one of those that makes you go, that doesn't feel necessary. Maybe it's a me and tone thing though, because it does feel icky to me. It feels more like a sort of thing that a teenage boy would say than like a grown woman. We have these people who are in their mid to late 20s. I would not be surprised if I heard the phrase like, he's down bad, or like he wants you bad, or anything like that. But something about like him wanting to bang the crap out of you, and again, that might not just be a tone thing, that might also be that it doesn't sound right to me accent wise. Like if I maybe try and think of it in an American accent, would it be different? But disregarding that, I do like the little pep talk that Josie gives to Adeline. She tells her that Cameron isn't the one who hurt her, and as hard as it is, giving him and frankly herself a chance isn't a bad thing. And again, it is just a pep talk. This isn't one of those, we are generally, not completely, but in more and more I am seeing us move away from one pep talk makes you a changed woman kind of thing. It's just a pep talk, and it's nice, it's good to see, and it's one of those things where it's like, you know, she needs to have heard that. We also found out that Maria's family, the Vasquez family, had real bad financial troubles after Maria's mother died, but a mysterious benefactor has been helping them out, and this benefactor seems to do so with most of the town's problems. We don't get any more info on that now, but it becomes important later on. Well, kind of. We'll get there when we get there. It also comes up that Josie was raised by a single mum with an unknown absent father who paid regular childcare. We have it confirmed later on, but it is somewhat left open for us to assume that the benefactor and this absent father are the same person. So Diane, the PTA mum, Karen type, is a little bit drunk and is at least trying to flirt with Cameron. Adeline goes to help him out, and it's a cute, funny scene, proper little rom-com moment. Just the right side of awkward. I'd rather we didn't get mention of Cameron's poor hands again, but it didn't detract too much from the scene itself. It's cute, it's silly, I'm here for it, and it ends with him hauling her up so we can leg it out of Diane's radar. It is simple, good, fun, and like I said, it's got that like, oh my god, this is so awkward, but it's like kind of secondhand embarrassment. So again, if that is the sort of thing that you can't read or watch or anything with that sort of thing, rom-coms probably aren't for you anyway, if I'm totally honest. I get it, especially because, you know, a lot of people who I know are neurodivergent. Secondhand embarrassment stuff just feels so amplified to a lot of us, but I found it fun here. I thought it was fun. I found it fun here. I thought it was fun. This is why I have to stick to my scripts. But when they're out of the way, we get the phrase, the green in his eyes darkened. Like I mentioned this earlier with right near the start with the icy blue eyes of her father changing colour. I just hate it so much. Someone's eyes darkening is already something that I don't really like. Not least of all because it is massively overused, and it's sort of just expected that you know what it means. I can't remember if I explained it earlier because it was right near the beginning, but it's when someone's brow comes down, leaving their eyes in shadow, maybe paired with like their head tilting in the right way. But here, it's just silly. Armas is really obsessed with eye colour. It's a common thing with romance authors and writers who don't know how to describe people naturally, but specifically with romance authors, it's like but I didn't turn my volume off on my computer. Sorry, interruption. I could just hear my computer making sounds. Anyway, so yeah, it's common with romance authors because obviously, you know, you're likely to be looking into people's eyes if you're into them, or at least, you know, that's how it's supposed to be, I guess. And, you know, people's eyes are often said to be the windows of the soul, all that sort of thing. Armas is obsessed with people's eyes colours, though. And again, it's another one of those things that does make me wonder, was she a fan fiction author, even if her published works have nothing to do with that? Because the way she writes, you know, like, her as your eyes looked into my brown ones, or whatever, it's a lot of that shit. But the thing is, like, eye colour is far too important in her work. Like, because of this, here we have it where it's less his facial expression changing and more like his irises are transition lenses. It's really silly. It was the same thing that I mentioned earlier with like his eyes became an icier shade of blue or whatever that line was, where it's just like, that's not how this works. And I think excuse me, I think I don't like it, like the eyes darkening thing, is because authors never explain it. They just expect a reader to already know what that means. But if zero authors are explaining it, then nobody's going to find that out. They just have to kind of figure it. And it's a bit listen, generally the eyes darkening thing is just like I don't like it, but fine. This is ridiculous. You can't just say the green in his eyes darkened. You have to say his eyes darkened. And I guess that, like, the green in his eyes darkening implies that the rest of it does. But first of all, I'm not good at implication. Just in general. But also, it just sounds daft. It doesn't sound like a metaphor. It doesn't sound like, well, the implication is the rest of it. It just sounds like I said, it sounds like his eyes are transition lenses. It's silly. But the rest of the chapter is like the Armas classic. The tensions are rising. They're getting closer. Maybe something will happen this time. Like, ooh, is it going to happen? Nope. You're getting edged again. Chapter 27. Cameron. Adeline gets home as Cameron is making dinner, and once again we have our like ventriloquist dummy making an appearance when her lips bob because she's been complimented. And let me tell you, I've glossed over a ton of these occurrences, but if Adeline isn't a ventriloquist dummy, she might be a guppy because her lips are bobbing so much. She's like a goldfish. Like, her lips are always like bobbing, and it's just like, it's so docile. But we find out that the girls haven't got enough points in the league to make it to the finals, and it's not too surprising, really. Sure, they could have worked up from losses, you know, they did pretty well. Clearly, I'm pretty sure if they had won that match, they'd be in the finals. Like, I'm pretty sure that's how that would have worked, but, you know, it is how it is, you know. They were working from the bottom. There was no guarantee they would have won. And Cameron, while they're chatting, they're flirting a bit, and Cameron has to fight the urge to growl when Adeline calls him coach. One, you two have been calling each other coach and boss for far too long to still be all stirred up like that. Like, he calls her boss, she calls him coach, whatever. It's a romance book, and I can deal with that sort of shit. Two, can we start saying moan more? Or like a low moan instead of growling? Because if a man growled anywhere near me, I would laugh him out of whatever building we are stood in. How am I meant to take that seriously? I get it. It's meant to be like those primal urges thing. But it's just like, okay, Fido, pipe down. Can any of the people who read romance books, who enjoy the idea of a man growling, can you explain that to me? Because I always read that and I just think it's funny. To me, that's just as daft as any given, like, person on the internet being laughed at because they've gone awoo at the moon because they think they're a wolf. I think it's exactly the same. But as they're talking, conversation talks to Cameron's reason for being in Greenoak and why he finally left a public life behind. We get this all in one go, but thankfully it doesn't just feel like an exposition dump. This is the sort of thing where you probably would just tell someone this, like, all at once. It's not like learning more generally about someone's life. Like, you know, you might find out here and there about parents or grandparents, little bits like that, but something like this you are more likely to get all in one go, you know. I only bring it up because it is a frequent problem I see with sort of greener writers, you know, with writers with fan fiction backgrounds, and just generally writers who've been published before they've really honed their craft enough. They'll drop a million details on you at once and expect you to remember specifics from that later on. But this is storytelling in a much more natural way. So, get on to the reason why he's living a private life. When he was living in LA, someone broke into his house. It had been the night after returning from a game in Austin. Usually I left my cats with a neighbour, some old lady who claimed to be an old Hollywood star. I never recognised her from anything, but she took good care of them, so I trusted her. I shook my head. I'd been tempted to leave them with her an extra night and go straight to bed. I still have, or had, a few years left in me. You were right, but away games were starting to take their toll on me. The thing was, I missed the cats, and I was worried about Willow being the pain in the ass she can be, so I just collected them, went home, and crashed. I the image of what happened next was as clear as the day in my head. I think I slept at least 5 hours before hearing Willow's loud whining, so I opened my eyes and saw him there. A strange sound left Adeline. My eyelids shut. For a second, I thought I was dreaming, but then the guy moved and I knew someone had broken in and was in my room, by my bed. My whole body started to shake. It wasn't as bad as it had been at first, but every once in a while, I still got the shakes. I didn't even know how long the intruder had been in my room. Minutes, hours, the whole weekend I'd been away. My words dried out. My vocal cords were not working anymore. Fuck, And obviously, you know, those what ifs sent him spiraling, and the guy in his house was a fan, so sure, that fan was dealt with, but what's to say there wouldn't be others? It is a really effective scene. You know, I was talking earlier about how the idea of the revelations of, let me find what I actually wrote. Oh, you know, it was so long ago. I'll kind of paraphrase. But like the idea of like, do they actually make me feel anything? And do they make sense? I think was what it was. Like, was it worth the wait? And do they actually make me feel anything? I think was basically my parameters. And yes, they left it to a really good point. They didn't wait too long, but they waited till a good point to actually have, you know, those two are close enough where it actually has some impact. And yeah, that sounds fucking horrifying. I hear about that stuff quite a lot. I remember a couple of years ago, I'm not here to talk about any opinions we have on this woman. This isn't what this is about. But when Gabby Hanna was having a manic episode and some guy just went into her house to quote unquote help her, which is not what he was doing. That guy is a fucking grade A freak, but these sorts of things are genuinely horrifying, and yeah, it really does make you go, Jesus Christ, yeah, I wouldn't want to live a fucking public life either. But a couple of things are to know. One, this is why I can't stand Adeline's mate, Matthew. He cannot act like a normal fan. It wasn't someone who hated him who broke into his house, rather. So yeah, I don't like the fucking guy. And two, Adeline is beyond guilt-ridden about the way she behaved right near the start. So obviously during one of their early arguments, she effectively blackmailed him into being a coach again after she'd fired him. You know, she'd threatened to tell everyone who he is, she threatened to tell everyone who he is if he didn't come back. Just in case she'd forgotten. But he does forgive her, and he sees now just how heat of the moment everything was for her. He also apologises for having been a bit of a bellend to her in their early days. She dismisses him, saying that she kind of deserved it, but, you know, she heads to the bathroom before he can argue with her, because she knows he would argue with her, because even if she doesn't believe, like, she believes that she probably does deserve it at this point, but she absolutely knows that he's not having any of that. And while she's gone, he checks his phone to see an email from his former agent, and the Miami Flames, which is the team that Adeline was working for. So that's the company that her father owns. The Miami Flames are looking for a new sporting director, seemingly to fix a quote-unquote media mess. And there's a link in regards to said mess. Of course, when he opens it, he sees the now viral video of Adeline going for the mascot. Chapter 28. Adeline. She comes in to see a completely different version of Cameron than the one she left when she went into the bathroom. He's clearly upset at something, but obviously she has no idea what. So he shows her fucking pronouns. He shows her his phone, asking what this whole thing is about. And most of this is sort of just a retelling here. Like, we know what happened, but what is important is that Adeline is holding on to a lot of blame. And yes, she did mess up in this instance, but it's very clear that she sees herself as a problem in a wider sense than just this PR nightmare. We've been seeing this throughout, but this is the point where Cameron is like, no, you're absolutely not like a problem. You have caused problems, sure, but you are not a problem. And she asks him to put himself in her father's place. Like, what would he have done? And he tells her he would have protected her with everything in his power. Like, yes, a problem has to be fixed, but making her feel like an arse won't help. And, you know, I have a few feelings about that. On the one hand, yes, her father maybe overstepped by going, get out, leave, never want to see you again. You're a nightmare. But also, he can't treat her like an absolute prissy little princess. Because, like, oh, no, you're not a problem at all. You're fine. Like, he can't turn her into a Nepo baby. But he just doesn't know where to find that middle ground. Also, she quite rightly points out that he did make her feel really shitty. But, as in, Cameron made her feel really shitty. Like, oh, you're just daddy's little princess. You're a fucking Nepo baby. He wouldn't use those words because he's not online enough. But, like, Cameron is at least trying to rectify that now, and she does recognise that. And it's I like this. I like the way they connect here, because it's where we actually see Adeline maybe start to realise that, like, her dad's a dick. Like, which, to be fair, I get it. But they end up crashing together on the sofa, but Adeline wakes up on there alone, and, you know, she's got the horn, as you do, and she makes a joking comment about that to one of the cats, but turns out Cameron is in the kitchen and overheard her. And they joke about it a bit, but the conversation softens really quickly. He tells her that she should join him for yoga and meditation soon, and while a good therapist is likely what she needs to break down her issues, little things like this can be a good little sort of side dish to the main of therapy. And it's a good message. Stuff like meditation is good, but getting proper help from a professional is always going to be like a good priority. Again, I like that we're seeing this more in media. And I also like that we have here a man who is very much happy to take care of his mental health, because obviously the repertoire of men who should be in therapy in romance novels is a long history of men in romance novels. The worst one being the fact that, oh my god, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to go on a side tangent. I'm going to be talking about this at some point. I actually do want to do some videos about 50 Shades, because I talk about it so much, and my Bad Rep Book Club, like, my written stuff isn't up anymore because Bits, Bobs and Books is no longer a thing. But Christian Grey is in therapy. I don't remember if we find that out in the first one, but definitely in the second one we find out that he's in therapy, and the therapist is horrendous. Like, he has like a little one-on-one with Anastasia, or Anna, whatever. Fine. But he basically is like, yes, you are fixing my client. I don't know what you're doing, but you're fixing it. Like, I'm not saying you can fix somebody with therapy, because that's not necessarily what happens. A lot of therapy is breaking things down, learning how to cope when things get bad. You're not necessarily going to be fixed. But in essence, isn't that the therapist? He's been in therapy for years and you've never made any progress. How unself-aware are you? How little self-awareness do you have that you can't go, maybe I need a different therapist? Anyway, I'm not going to linger on that too long. Chapter 29, Adeline. Cameron takes Adeline out on a little hike to a secluded spot so they can camp out for the night. Any other Bad Rep Book Club boyfriend, and I absolutely would have assumed that he was about to go full serial killer, to be honest, so at least Cameron is better than that, I guess. Maybe not the fella from Icebreaker. I didn't love that book, but I feel like that guy was, like, relatively normal. Relatively. But I have also said near the beginning that there are a lot of tropes in this where it's like, this is one of those. This isn't any dig to En Masse, where it's like any other book and you easily could have turned this into a sort of thriller or a horror and I wouldn't have been against it. Because I just think that would be like a You situation, where it's like taking the romance tropes. You the book, by the way, less You the program, where we started to get a bit off track. Anyway, the plan isn't to camp out the whole night, but instead to spend some time just stargazing. And while it's getting dark, Adeline opens up about her ex, David, the one we met right up at the start. We've heard about him a little bit throughout, but he doesn't come up a huge amount apart from the fact that Adeline, most of when we're in Adeline's POV, like, she thinks about the fact that he's a dick sometimes and how much he has caused problems for her. And he's the one that took the position she wanted within the company. And David never wanted a relationship with her. She was a stepping stone for him to get closer to her father and secure the job that he now has. And it's not helped by the fact that Adeline's father really encouraged the relationship, and David just dropped her as soon as she wasn't useful to him anymore. Again, we can see why Adeline has, for want of a better way of putting it, a lot of fucking baggage and self-esteem issues. When I've complained about this in the past, with this book, I mean, I'm not annoyed at a character having self-esteem issues and having to put up a wall to cope with that. There are certain things that she's stubborn about, which I understand. But it doesn't mean it's not fucking annoying sometimes, where she's like, I never need any help. Like, I understand her not being able to ask for help, but when someone offers it, she can just never say yes. And also when somebody sort of gives her the things so she can help herself, she won't take it. So, like, when Cameron gives her the camping equipment, she just doesn't use it. And it's like, oh, sorry, would you rather sleep on the floor or in an infested bed? Can you not get a grip for a second? Like, I get it. I have been there with being overly stubborn about certain things. And her clothes are another one where she's like, I insist that I can't walk in heels because I'm big and strong and I'm an independent woman type shit. And it's like, no, you're going to break your ankle. And she nearly did break her ankle. Like, you are in a muddy, outdoorsy place. Ow, I just hit my knee on my desk. Just like, anyway. Adeline had overheard David bragging to his friend Paul about what he pulled off with this, like, getting the job. And Adeline lost it. Paul isn't just David's friend, but also the Miami Flames mascot, Sparkles. We know the rest from here. We've seen that. This is what was filmed in the viral video. And we get a lot of Cameron comforting and uplifting Adeline. It's good stuff. You love to see it. And as he's doing so, the distance between them closes and they finally have their first kiss. She ends up on top of him. I am not describing any more of this. The idea of anything in the woods or like whatever outside is a no-no to me, but you do you. I do not need bugs anywhere near me. And no, Zelda, no, you can't go that way because you press buttons. You did yesterday. You turned the recording off. Go a different direction. But there's no penetration. This isn't like, this is what you may just class as like, I don't know what the bases are. There's no pain action. I think it's mostly just, but you know what? She uses words like clit instead of nub or whatever. Yes, I have seen the word nub used before. Zelda, you are not coming in this direction. I can see the look in your eyes. You press buttons. And then you turn the recording off. No, don't look at me like that. I love you too, but no. And yes, I'm glad we don't get nub. I'm glad, like I said, I have heard that before. I'm glad we don't get my core or my essence or whatever. Like, she uses actual anatomical words. Good. But while they're in their moment of clarity, Adeline gets a call from Josie telling her that her mother has arrived. Chapter 30. Adeline. So they head to the coffee shop that Josie runs so they can meet/pick up Adeline's mum. While in the car, she apologises for possibly having ruined a really lovely night, but he doesn't need an apology. It's the sort of night they can easily have in the future. And, you know, they had some fun. It's not like they didn't get much stargazing done, but they still had a nice time. And I'm curious and a little excited to meet your mother. Of course you are, I murmured. Everyone is curious and a little excited where Maricela Reyes is concerned. Let it go, he said, before kissing me hard and fast on the lips. Whatever is making you worried, make it disappear. There's no use for it now. Thank you for that bit of advice, Cameron. In line with smile more or don't be sad. No, don't kill yourself. You're so sexy. Whatever's making you worried, make it disappear. Go, get real. As soon as they get into the coffee shop, Adeline's mum is like all over her like a rash. Have you been sick? Your cheeks are red and your lips look swollen. My hand flew to my mouth, or it would have if it hadn't been held by Cameron. Bit to unpack. One, obviously she's flushed and swollen from her campsite activities. It's fun, whatever, bit silly. Ooh, a little bit embarrassing. Tee-hee-hee. 2, why not just say something like, my hand would have flown to my mouth if it weren't being held by Cameron? Or being held by Cameron's. It just feels very clunky, like, my hand flew to my mouth. Or it would have done, and it's just like, don't like it. Anyway, that just, like, it just feels like you've said too much for something that could have been reduced a bit. I'm not saying everything has to be really sort of, I think pragmatic would be the right word for that, but I can't think off the top of my head. 3, you have 2 hands. And if you don't, then it would have been nice to have been told by now. And it's fine, you know, we'll get hold of the manufacturers, we'll get a new arm sorted in no time. Like, tell me, are we missing the arm with or without the stick? Because I'm pretty sure ventriloquist dummies have that, where you, like Kermit style. Anyway, point I'm making is like, oh, my hand flew to my mouth, or it would have if it hadn't been held by Cameron. What's your other hand doing then? Her mother is a Spanish speaker, Cuban, I think, and given that, Adeline calls her Mammy, and man, wrestling brain rot has got me in a chokehold because in my head, that word is just so intrinsically tied to Rhea Ripley. Like, I don't even really watch WWE at this point, but like, I do need more hobbies. No, you can't press buttons. No, you come and there are different directions. Don't you smack me. You can go in the opposite direction. You can go that way. There are 2 directions to leave. Yeah, look, you can see my hand. This is another direction to leave. Go that way, dickhead. I love you, but you're a knob. So, yeah, it's clear that Cameron and Maricela are getting on well. She has a real sort of cheek to her in a generally fun way. You know, she wants to get to know what Cameron's intentions are. We're at Josie's joint, so the owner is there, and she gets a call. So remember earlier when we found out that the Green Warriors didn't get through to the finals because of points? Well, good news. Elena Armas has discovered contrivance. One of the teams in the final has randomly been disqualified. Why have a needless Deus Ex Machina when you could have just had them come up from the bottom? Time to be me again. AEW Continental Classic, a round-robin tournament for the modern Triple Crown. It started as just for the Continental Crown belt, but Eddie Kingston put in the 2 belts he was carrying at the time, the Ring of Honor World Championship and the New Japan Strong Openweight Championship, these 3 belts creating the new Triple Crown. So, of everyone in that tournament, Eddie had the most to lose. Obviously, 2 out of the 3 belts there are his. And the tournament did not start well for him. He lost his first 2 matches, especially painfully losing to Bryan Danielson, one of his oldest enemies in this business. They came up at very similar times as far as I am aware. I believe Danielson may have been wrestling a little longer. But Eddie was not ready to let those early losses take him out. He had to fight from the bottom, but fight he did, winning his next 3 matches, scoring himself a place in the semis. His first win of the tournament being against Claudio Castagnoli, a win holding so much importance. He'd just lost to one of his oldest enemies, and there is nobody Kingston hates more in this world than Claudio Castagnoli. A win here is a huge boost. An old enemy defeated, the man he took the ROH World Championship from defeated, and importantly, Castagnoli is one of Danielson's teammates in the Blackpool Combat Club. So much is held in that match, and he gets that win, going on to then defeat Daniel Garcia and Andrade El Idolo. In the semi-finals, he beats Bryan Danielson, a man who he had not been able to beat before this match, not just in this tournament, in his career. And then in the finals, he beat his longtime friend and longtime rival. It is a long story, but he beats Jon Moxley and becomes the Triple Crown champion, emulating some of his Japanese idols with this status. If you know Eddie Kingston, you know his love of Japanese pro wrestling, in a very particular era as well. Both roads to the finals for Eddie Kingston and for the Green Warriors here are laid out before them by one or more creators. The predetermined nature of wrestling is well known by now, and this football tournament effectively works the same way from a kind of meta point of view. It's about how you lay that path out. Sure, the football team is not the main focus of this book, but it's not completely left to the background either. It would have been nice to have seen their improvement rewarded, ultimately reflecting how things not only improved but flourished with Adeline and Cameron. And I know I'm going hard on this one thing, but it just feels so careless. Without this little ragtag team, you would not have been able to bring your love interests together. Show them more love. I said near the start that when Cameron and Adeline first meet, it feels like they really don't care to be working with this team. And now it feels like our master doesn't really care about them either. And look, I'm not expecting the same kind of storytelling here. I'm just showing an example of tournament storytelling in action done well, done incredibly well. The Continental Classic was a genuinely fantastic tournament with a great number of people in terms of being able to do storytelling. Obviously, to be also like one of the biggest tournaments in wrestling would probably be the G1, which is in New Japan Pro Wrestling. It's a much bigger tournament. There's usually like 4 blocks with a bunch of people in there. It's harder to keep track of the storytelling being done, but here it's far easier for me to explain. Like, you can follow one man's journey. Like I said, the football tournament is not front and centre in this narrative, but I assume you want me to care about the girls. Otherwise, you wouldn't have put this contrived way of getting them to the finals into your narrative. Make it something worth caring about. But everyone is all up and cheering, celebrating, hugging each other when Adeline hugs Cameron. Her mother says, "Mira, mira, look," I heard my mother say with a laugh. "They totally banged. Do you think they're part of the situationship stage?" Ew. Inside thoughts. That's your daughter. Again, it's also the word banged. I hate that word, apparently. Anyway, the two of them, as in Adeline and her mother, end up alone having a bit of a chat, and it comes up that Maricela doesn't really get why Adeline is here in Green Oak. If you recall from earlier, it was kept from her for a while, and it's still clearly not been fully explained. "I really messed up, Mum. There's a conduct clause in my contract." "You are his daughter," she interjected. "He shouldn't care about clauses." I think he should. I think, sure, maybe he didn't handle it perfectly, but she shouldn't go completely unpunished. Don't turn her into an entitled Nepo baby. I was talking about this earlier. He just doesn't know how to strike the balance between treating her like a daughter and an employee. She is both. But Adeline is still being confronted with some harsh truths, especially in regards to her relationship with her father. Adeline is like, yeah, I always admired and respected him, but she has to be brought down to earth. It was always a case of her having put him on a pedestal. He could never be the man she'd made him out to be. Probably why him having been such a dick ever since David screwed her over hurt just as much as it did. And as Maricela is breaking this down for her daughter, I get my ultimate moment of vindication when she says he believes he is the puppet master. What have I been saying? He's not her dad. He is a master craftsman and ventriloquist. I am onto you. Her father has a bit of a secret past, though, unrelated to him being a ventriloquist. Years back, Maricela found letters in his office. While he doesn't seem to have been cheating, the letters are from a woman and also show that he isn't from Miami like he'd often claimed. we don't learn really any more at this point. It's later on, really close to the end, that we learn more about that. And also, I didn't talk earlier about like Adeline revealing to Cameron about her, like the video and stuff. Really not that effective for me, but it brings them closer together. It was fine, honestly. It was likely never going to be quite as big as Cameron's because we had that kept from us, whereas as readers, you know, we know about Adeline's past a lot more. In response to Adeline asking why her mother has never said anything about these letters, my mother smiled and her eyes began to water. Love is a funny game, mi amor. There are no rules, and no matter how hard you try to win, one way or another, your heart is always on the line. Now, you say that, Maricela, but I'm not sure I agree. In his 1987 piece, Never Gonna Give You Up, Rick Astley opens with the lines, "We're no strangers to love. You know the rules, and so do I." And personally, I am more inclined to believe Mr. Astley in this instance. Throughout his work, we can assume that these rules are to never give someone up, let someone down, run around and desert someone, make someone cry, say goodbye to someone, or tell a lie and hurt someone. Whereas I don't see you backing up your idea for any lack of rules, though I'll happily read any updated versions of your thesis. Thank you. Jokes aside, the reason she never told Adeline about these letters is because of the way that Adeline idolised her dad. She didn't want to tarnish her image of him. They move on to talking about Adeline's relationship with Cameron. It's a cute chat. She's clearly happy for her daughter, and when she makes a cheeky comment, Adeline's jaw falls to the floor, so we will get a repairment on that. The next scene opens really nicely. It's just really good writing as thoughts are swirling and spiralling around Adeline's head. It's a case of a lot of things coming together and making sense to her. Things are clicking. She's feeling for her mum. She's realising that things are becoming kind of real between her and Cameron, and you're really in it with her. It's really nicely written. The rest of the chapter is just Cameron and Adeline cuddled up, having a good little chat. It's a lovely scene. It's mundane, but that's not an insult. We need moments of calm like this. And while they're chatting, we get to learn that Cameron has definitely made the decision to stay in Green Oaks, and it would certainly seem that he wants Adeline to stay there with him long term. Chapter 31. Cameron. He's at practice with the girls, and while they're doing their work, Cameron makes a call to his agent. He's digging for info on the Miami Flames with the earlier possible job offer, and he finds out that the team appears to be changing hands soon. It's being sold. It doesn't take any prompting to figure out that David is likely the one taking over. While it doesn't say this here, it's not like you could put two and two together. He already dicked over Adeline to get his current position, and now she's not around to be an alternative. She's not even technically working for the company at this point. And Cameron ends the call by telling his agent to turn down any job offers. He's made the decision to stay here in Green Oak. He also decides not to tell Adeline about the Miami situation until he can confirm for sure what's going down. And she calls him into her office, and I will not go into too much detail about what happens next, but I'm sure you can use your imagination a little bit. This isn't a critique of our master's writing, but when things are heating up, Cameron thinks about how he wants to rip Adeline's blouse off with his teeth, which is fine. He's getting all like horny, primal brain, whatever. But unfortunately, the mental image I conjured was of a man painstakingly trying to unbutton each individual button with his teeth, which is just comical, honestly. Though, frankly, if your man can do that, he's probably a keeper. Wait, did our mask never use that joke? Have I been robbed? I genuinely don't think she ever used the "he's a keeper" joke. For shame. It's so simple. I'm a simple man. I want to see something like that. Anyway. It is scenes like this that make me question if it is appropriate that I am reading this stuff in public, though. Because, like, generally speaking, in terms of, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's fine to read this stuff in public when we've got something with a simple illustrated cover. You know, like, you'd probably get side-eyed for whacking out one of those ones where the cover is just, like, 90% of just a man, like, 90% of the cover is just a man's tits and torso, but, like, that's a bit more overt. But I still wonder, like, is it appropriate that I read this stuff in public? Because, like, you wouldn't watch even just a regular movie with a sex scene in public. Is it appropriate to read spicy stuff in public? Anyway, this is, however, a critique. Like, the unbuttoning stuff isn't a critique of Armas's writing. This, however, is. Because this scene is one of those that really plays into the whole issue with this type of book, where women always finish so fast. And I get that it's a sexual fantasy. You want a man who can just, like, get you to where you need to be. But, like, come off it. You just need some time skips or more overt references to, like, things taking time. I'm not necessarily saying when I say that, but it's just like, you know, he did X to me for 5 minutes. But it was just like, reference the fact that things are taking time. We were at this for a while type of shit, right? I don't write this kind of scene, but I can still give some more general advice, which is, if you are writing real-time action, and that's with anything, with no time skips or mentions of doing something for X amount of time, or saying that something took a while, even if that is a bit vague, the actions take about as long as it takes to read. I believe I've spoken about this before. Now, obviously, some people read very slowly, others read very quickly, but generally speaking, I'd say you're looking at 1 to 2 minutes per page with an average pace. The easiest way to find this out is to read something out loud. And that helps with a lot of writing issues and things like this, where you're going, could you or would you finish in that time if you are not using something particularly powerful? Because obviously you may well finish quickly if you're using a toy with, like, that gets you to where you need to be. But, like, you're just using a person. And yes, a sense of time is difficult, but in books like this, these are scenes that people are looking for. Most women don't climax after, like, 2 minutes. Especially, like I say, if you're not using any toys. Allow for a sense of time to pass. You don't need to be clinical, like I'm saying, you know, like, oh, he did this for 5 minutes and this lasted for 2 minutes. Like, but you can just give the sense that, like, you know, you could point out that an act went on beyond the time it takes to read the words. Saying, you know, that something took a while. Say that we were... just focus on the emotions of it as well. So, like, while you're saying that, like, you know, you pointed out that, like, this is the action that you're doing, take some time to talk about how that feels, because then that implies that it's taking a bit longer than it is. And like I say, I don't write scenes like this, and I've never tried. I can't offer specific advice, but I've read enough to be able to spot when a woman's pleasure is really front and center, and it's clear that Armas is aiming for that, but in this scene, she's not quite on target. And again, it's a shame when we're seeing women writing scenes like this, where I can see what the fantasy is. It's like, oh, the woman climaxes quickly because, 1, we don't have a good sense of time, and 2, well, obviously, generally, a lot of women don't get to have that pleasure, if they get that pleasure at all. But you have to be clear about this sort of thing, and it is just annoying. I think it's really bad in 50 Shades. I haven't read it in a long time, so I can't remember. I try and delete the specifics of those scenes from my memory, but I've watched Elise talk about it. I speak about her videos a lot because her reviews are very good, and she speaks about it in that, like, she's done so quickly, and it's just like, it's just not realistic. And surely they're the scenes that you, like, even if the rest of it is a bit, like, sort of fantastical, it's over the top and whatever, because it's romance and that's part of a big fantasy, but surely they're the scenes that you want to be grounded a little bit. Even if you're doing sort of more adventurous sex, like in, say, 50 Shades of Grey, at least what it's aiming for, or you are writing literal fantasy stuff, you still want some grounding. Anyway, let's move on from this. because I can't talk too much in specifics. I don't get that many views anyway, and I'm definitely not getting pushed out if I start talking about, bing bongs. Chapter 32, Adeline. This whole chapter is fine, it's just not worth much mentioning. Most of it is a sex scene. Pre-sex, we get a ventriloquism moment, which I nearly missed because I was actually invested in the book. And in regards to the sex itself, one, it actually feels like it improves on the last one because it actually feels like we went on a journey to arrive at the destination. Unlike the last one. She isn't done in a couple of minutes. Two, overall, Armas does know how to write scenes like this. I didn't like Spanish Love Deception, but even then, I remember that the spicy scenes were well written, again, from what I remember. And, they ought to be. This is an author who makes you wait for the explicit stuff. If the stuff the readers are waiting for ends up being a disappointment, people wouldn't be best pleased and wouldn't want to keep reading her work. 3, it's good to see a go piss girl moment at the end of the scene. If you have been vaginally penetrated by literally anything, gotta go piss. That's not just the penis and the vaginas. If you've used a penis, if you've used toys, if you've used fingers, whatever, go piss afterwards because it decreases your chances of getting a UTI. This has been your PSA. Chapter 33, Adeline. The next morning, her friend Matthew calls her. Once again, he's being really fucking weird about Cameron. That whole call is a bag of nothing. Matthew is a non-character. When we get to the epilogue, Armas implies that I'm supposed to have given a shit about him. I don't, and I can't imagine who does care about him. He is just there to be practical and also fucking annoying and weird. He mostly just exists to tell Adeline things about what's going on with the club, and also exists to be like, oh, you're with Cameron, I love Cameron, I'm a weird fan. But frankly, this whole chapter is nothing and could have been removed. At the end of the chapter, we see that Adeline gets an email. We could have found that in the next chapter. Literally a pointless chapter could have been removed. But anyway, chapter 34, Adeline. We start this chapter with, how many times can I say that word? With Adeline mid-panic attack because of what she's seeing from that email. She's found out that her dad is selling the club. She's sure it's her fault, and even if it isn't, she'll probably be a scapegoat. She also finds out that Cameron had an idea of this happening, and as you'd imagine, she's not best pleased. This is also the scene where I first really, when I was actually reading it, started picking up on Cameron's overuse of the word goddamn. It is annoying throughout the rest of the book, but from here, it got really obvious and infuriating. I still can't tell if it was being used more than the rest of the book, but from this point, I swear it started showing up more and more. I don't know if it was just a case of, I was getting towards the end, and even if I was enjoying myself, when you get to towards the end of the book, there is a bit of, especially for me, because I'm reviewing, I do tend to try to get a lot done at once when I'm getting towards the end of the book, so I didn't know if it was that I'd noticed it more because I was reading a lot more at once, but I don't know, it was just... And the thing is, this is a really good scene, but the goddams really get in the way. Yes, they're arguing, but their feelings are being made really clear, and they're in the open. They've learned to properly explain themselves to each other. He didn't want to ruin the finals of the league for her without having all of the details for himself, but she feels like she's been kept in the dark. She's finally trusting him, and a little bit, even not completely, it's not completely, but a little bit of that trust has been broken. And I like seeing a good I like seeing good communication at this point in a book like this. It makes me believe there's actually been some kind of character growth. I remember one of my biggest issues with Icebreaker was the fact that their arguments felt deeply repetitive. And they always talked about how we're really good at open communication. We know how to communicate with each other. They fucking didn't. Whereas here, they never say that. They never say that they're good communicators. This is the difference between telling and showing. What's her face? Hannah Grace always writes, that she's telling us we are good communicators, but what she's showing us is something completely different. Whereas here, we are never ever told these people are good communicators, and they're not for a long time. But when it's like, we're never being told that there's character development, we're never being told that they can communicate with each other, but we're seeing how they've grown and changed. Like, we're being shown that. It's great. And yes, sure, it's still a little bit messy, but it's an argument at the end of the day. Most people are a tiny bit messy in an argument. They've still grown as characters. It's great. It's a great scene. Chapter 35. Cameron. In the heat of the moment, he leaves the cabin without Adeline, regretting it immediately, but he just doesn't feel like he can turn back. So he's at the finals without her, and he knows that she's gone back to Miami to, deal with everything. Maria comes up to him, and, she's asking where Adeline is, and she gets told that she's off on an emergency business back in Miami. You don't need to tell the kids what's going on at all. Not least of all at their big moment. But it becomes one of those scenes where, like, a precocious little kid is all full of wisdom and tells the adult what to do to mend things in a roundabout kind of way. And I get why people like these scenes. Obviously, it makes sense. It's like a cute kid with all this wisdom, and it's like, it's nice, It's cute kids being cute kids. They're just not for me. This isn't a criticism of En Masse, just more of a personal preference kind of thing. This isn't about her writing. It's just something that I'm not a fan of. I generally think that the old person equivalent of these scenes work much better. The elderly have a life behind them. They're full of experience to pull from and to give advice. And yeah, kids are often very happy to say exactly what they're thinking, no filter. That often can be like, they're saying what adults won't. But old people also often just say whatever's on their mind because they don't give a shit anymore. But I will say, as a slight criticism, it's just a thing with these scenes in general. The kids never sound like children in these scenes. And don't get me wrong, kids often say something, sometimes they'll say a phrase or whatever that makes them sound suddenly really grown up. But Maria doesn't sound like a 9-year-old girl here, and I'm pretty sure she's meant to be about 9. But effectively it all amounts to, go get your girl back. Chapter 36. Adeline. There's an issue with security letting her back in, but her old assistant, Kelly, comes through to help her out. And when she gets in, she sees that David is with her father in his office, and is just immediately a bellend. I mean, what do we expect? But he is quickly sent out, so Adeline, her father, can talk just one-to-one. And this is a scene of plot twists that honestly don't really matter, but they kind of do. So, earlier on we spoke about this mystery benefactor that's been helping Greenoak over the years, and it is Andrew. It is her dad. And we also learned that he's from the town, because when she was talking to her mother, we found out in the letters that he's not from Miami, as is often claimed. He's actually from Greenoak. And the big reason that he invests in so much in this town is not just because he's from there, but because before he met Maricela, his not now wife, but Adeline's mother, they never got married, I believe because of those letters. But before he met her, he had a daughter in the town, Josie. And I read this and just went, right, okay. That revelation did a grand total of fuck all for me. It just felt like a twist for the sake of it. Also, my throat just made the nastiest noises I breathed in. Brilliant. And yeah, like, it's not that there weren't little sprinklings of signs that, like, we may have a revelation about her father. Because, we found out that her father is absent, and we'd found, like, it wasn't made perfectly clear, but it was left open to interpretation that the benefactor and her father are the same person. But what is the purpose of this reveal? Because I thought maybe when I went back over the book for the purpose of this script, for putting everything together, I'd go, oh, right, yeah, no, okay, maybe I do care about that now. No, I don't. And, like, I'm sure for some people there's a bit of that, like, oh, Adeline has a sister now. But, like, I just think it's a bit It felt like it was putting, it feels so Disney. It just feels so like, why do I care? And again, if somebody who likes this book in a different way, like who actually fully enjoyed this book, loved it, didn't have many criticisms of it or whatever, if you can explain to me why this made you feel something, I would love to know that. But overall, even with the plot twists, this is still a really good scene, especially character-wise. Because despite battling through her emotions, Adolin is finally able to really stand up for herself. It doesn't feel like the defense mechanism type stuff we saw with her and Cameron at the start. Like, she doesn't feel all like icy cold sort of thing. It's that like it's not like that catty energy type deal. She is still vulnerable here. She is open, but she's able to stand up for herself. It's a great showing of how her character has developed throughout the book. Like I said, Armas does do a good job of, knowing the difference between showing and telling. I think that's great. Chapter 37. Cameron. Of course, he has made it to Miami after the finals. He was always going to come and meet her. This is a rom-com, this is a romance. And he asks her where she is. I'm on my way out of the Miami Flames grounds. I was going home when I saw your missed calls. Can you wait there for me? For the first time in hours, I breathed a little easier. Don't go home yet. I'm coming to you. Just wait for me, please. But, she started. Cameron, she said again, and my heart seemed to skip 1, 2, 5 beats. I didn't mean my apartment. I meant Green Oak. Oh, that's really cute. It just gives me all those warm, fuzzy feelings. Like, that's what you're looking for in a romance book. Just, aww, it's cute. Oh, this is the stuff that warms the cockles. Yeah, I thought that was really sweet. It was one of those where it's like, I know I'm nearing the end of the book. This is the last, actual chapter in the book. And I was just like, oh, that's really soft. Oh, I still feel things in this book. That's the thing. Is while this isn't my favourite book in this world, this isn't my favourite book in the world. It still made me feel things, which is beyond, being annoyed at some of the writing. I'm glad to get little moments like that, because, yeah, oh, it's cute. And his first act when he sees her is to beg for forgiveness. And she says she will if he says to her what he stopped himself from saying during the argument before she left. And, of course, that means he tells her he loves her. And, again, it's cute. Everything has come together, and I'm all cozy and happy. We also find out that the girls won the finals, and when David comes over to try and stir the pot, he gets a little bit roughed by Cameron, but most importantly, Adolin hits him with the right. It's a wonderful and satisfying ending. And that should have been the end. Finish at the finish, But instead, epilogue. A little over a year later, Adolin. Where are they now? Epilogues are pointless, and that is a hill I'm happy to die on. Sure, we get invested in a story and want to know more about our characters. We've grown attached. But if this had ended when chapter 37 ended, we'd have had everything we needed. You can go be a fan of these characters and imagine how they're getting on. Go read or write fanfic if you're that way inclined. Make fan art of it. Enjoy it. Even just imagine for yourself what they may be doing now. You don't have to try to wrap everything up in a bow. And this epilogue made me finish the book on kind of a sour note. I talk about her all the time, but Lucy Diamond writes incredible fiction. I love her stuff. It's slice of life type stuff. And she finishes at the finish, and I'm often left, as I would have been if we've ended at chapter 37, going, oh, I would like to know where they are now. That's really cute. I talk about it all the time. I remember the first Lucy Diamond book that I read where I was at the end going, especially her first novel rather than a short novella. I always want to know what her characters are doing now, and she doesn't do too many sequels or series or anything like that. I think she has one where we have recurring characters, most of it is just a case of you finish at the end. You know, this epilogue, it's easily the weakest writing in the whole book. It feels like she's writing fanfiction of her own stuff. And it truly is just here to set up a potential sequel with Matthew and Josie. Two side characters who are side characters for a reason. Matthew is annoying as bollocks and only ever shows up to give her club information. And Josie was emotional support. We don't need more. And sure, we got more information about the whole, like, who her father is or whatever. It does not matter. I don't think I'll read it if she does write this sequel. I've read enough en masse, to be honest. She's not a bad author, really. She's just one with things to critique, which is fine. That's all authors. There are just people I prefer and people I hate more in this genre. Like, if I want to read a rom-com, I can go to someone like Freya North, who does write really good rom-coms. Or I can, if I want to go in a Bad Rep Book Club route, I can go to a Colleen Hoover. Elena Armas is a good enough author. If you like it, I understand why. If you don't, I also understand why. Because overall, yeah, I did really enjoy this book. It is not the best thing I've read in its genre. It's not even the best thing I've read by Armas. But I had fun with it for sure. I took a little bit of warming up to it. But if I weren't reading for a review, I'd have still finished it, despite my issues with it. It's a very easy read, and it's a fun little romp. Sure, it's a bit of a brain-off book, but they can be useful and good sometimes. I can't say I'd finish most Bad Rep Book Club books. You know, if you like a slow burn, if you like enemies to lovers, this is probably for you. And, you know, the spicy content is well written. It's not something that is throughout. For example, like an Icebreaker, it's not something where you get a lot of adult scenes. There are, I think, 3. And they are sort of more towards the end. But only in the epilogue did I wish I weren't reading this book. So I can't really complain. It's, for me, better than Spanish Love Deception, but it's not as good as American Roommate Experiment. I'm not going to be annoyed that I've read this like I have been with other Bad Rep Book Club reads. It's a good enough book. I'm happy I read it. There is no reason for this video to be as long, but I have had beef with Armas in the past. And if this is the rubber match, then I think it ends in a, yeah, she's alright. I don't dislike her as an author, and I don't mean that as anything to do with her personal character. I literally just mean that as her writing. Elena Armas is a figment being. She is just the person whose name is on this book. I have no idea what she's like. I just mean her writing. I have no beef with her. She's fine. But this has been a long ass video, so I think it is about time we wrapped up. Thank you so much for sitting through this. I'm glad I could be your background noise while you do some work, do some chores, maybe do a bit of DIY. Let me know what you're reading right now, or let me know what you were getting up to while listening to this big old beast. And I say listening to because I know better than to say watching. Despite the fact I know I have visuals, I know y'all are only listening when a video is this long. But feel free to like, subscribe, all that other cringe shit I'm meant to be asking you to do. But most importantly, I hope you have a wonderful day, a wonderful night, a wonderful whenever you are watching this. Take good care of yourself. Right.